At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law ordered me to hand over the keys to my house in front of 200 guests. I walked outside and made a call. He went hysterical when he saw who it was. I am Silas Vance, 75 years old, and I have spent my life building foundations for skyscrapers and bridges, ensuring they could withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. But I never thought I would have to reinforce my own life against the people I share blood with. My daughter-in-law threw 40 years of my life onto the wet grass and called it trash. She told me I was going to a state-run nursing home to die quietly. My son just stood there and polished his shoes. They thought they were evicting a helpless old man. They didn't know they were evicting the landlord. What happens when the person you treat like garbage turns out to own the ground you walk on? You are about to find out. Before I tell you how I destroyed their little empire, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not given. Now let us go back to the moment my heart broke and my revenge began. The taxi pulled up to the curb of the house I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. I had just come from my quarterly cardiology appointment, a routine checkup to ensure the old ticker was still beating. The doctor had given me a clean bill of health, telling me I had the heart of a man 20 years younger. I was feeling good. I was feeling grateful. But that feeling died the second the taxi driver put the car in park. I did not hear birds singing. I did not hear the wind in the oaks. The first thing I heard was a hissing sound, that rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the automatic sprinklers. But they were not watering the grass. They were watering my life. There, scattered across the manicured fescue of the front lawn, was everything I owned. My clothes were piled in a wet, sodden heap near the mailbox. My books, first editions of engineering manuals and history books I had collected since the 60s, were splayed open, their pages drinking in the water and curling up like dying leaves. And my crates of vinyl records, my 1958 Miles Davis first pressing, my Coltrane. The records Ruby and I used to dance to in the living room when we could not afford to go out. They were soaking wet, the cardboard sleeves disintegrating into gray mush under the relentless spray of the water. I did not wait for the driver to open the door. I scrambled out, my 75-year-old knees protesting as I ran toward the pile. The water hit me cold and hard, soaking through my shirt instantly. I grabbed a crate of records, trying to shield them with my body, but it was too late. The water had already seeped in. The memories were drowning. I looked up at the porch. There she was, Courtney, my daughter-in-law. She was leaning against the doorframe, a glass of chilled white wine in her manicured hand, looking at me like I was a stray dog digging in her petunias. She was wearing a white silk blouse that cost more than my first car. She did not move to help. She just took a slow sip of her wine and watched me scramble in the mud. "Stop it!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Turn it off, Courtney. These are Ruby's things." Courtney did not flinch. She smiled, but it was not a smile. It was a baring of teeth. "It is called curb appeal, Silas," she said, her voice cutting through the sound of the water. "We cannot have that junk inside. The photographer is coming in an hour. The house needs to be staged." Staged. She was staging the house, my house, the house where I raised my son Dante, the house where Ruby took her last breath in the master bedroom holding my hand. Courtney called it staging. I called it desecration. I dropped the wet records, realizing they were ruined, and then I saw it. Lying near the sprinkler head was the framed photo from our wedding day. It was black and white. Ruby in her lace dress looking like a queen, and me in my rented tuxedo smiling like I owned the world. It was lying face down in a puddle of mud. I lunged for it. I did not care about the water. I did not care about my dignity. I just wanted to save Ruby's face from the dirt. My hand reached out, fingers brushing the frame. Crack. A high heel came down on the frame before I could grab it. The sound of the glass shattering was louder than the sprinklers. I looked up, water dripping from my eyelashes. Courtney was standing over me, her expensive designer shoe grinding the glass into the photo. She twisted her foot, digging the heel in deeper, grinding Ruby's smile into the mud. "Oops," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. I did not see that piece of trash there. I froze. I looked at the shards of glass mixing with the mud and the paper. I looked at her shoe, and then I looked at her face. In that moment, the grief I had carried for 5 years turned into something else. It turned into a cold, hard stone in my gut. "You broke it," I whispered. "It was already broken, Silas," she said, taking another sip of wine. "Just like this arrangement. You are bringing down the property value just by standing there. Look at you. You are soaking wet. You look like a vagrant. We need top dollar for this place. The listing went live 30 minutes ago. Listed. She had listed the house while I was at the doctor. She had planned this. She had waited until I was gone to throw my life onto the lawn. You cannot sell this house, I said, standing up slowly. My joints popped. I wiped the mud from my hands onto my pants. I live here. This is my home. Courtney laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound like breaking china. Not any more pops. Dante and I discussed it. A $3 million asset shouldn't be occupied by a non-paying tenant who smells like Old Spice and heart medicine. We accepted a cash offer 5 minutes ago. The new owners want immediate occupancy. That means you need to go. She pointed her wine glass toward the street. Get your trash off my lawn, Silas. The garbage truck comes tomorrow, but I do not think even they will take this junk. I stood there, the water running down my back, looking at the woman my son had married. She thought she had all the power. She thought she held the keys to the kingdom. She looked at me and saw a withered branch that needed to be pruned. She did not realize she was standing on the roots, and she had no idea that I was the one who watered them. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just looked at the broken picture frame in the mud. I bent down and picked up a single shard of glass. I put it in my pocket. Is Dante here? I asked. My voice was steady. Too steady. He is inside packing your toiletries, she said, checking her watch. He is a good husband. He does what needs to be done, unlike you. I walked past her. I walked up the steps of the porch that I had built with treated lumber 20 years ago. I walked past the woman who thought she was the queen of the castle. I walked into the house. The air conditioning was freezing. The house smelled of lavender and bleach, not the warm scent of vanilla and old books that it used to have. The furniture was different. My comfortable recliner was gone, replaced by a stiff, modern beige sofa that looked like it belonged in a dentist's office. The walls were bare. The family photos were gone. It was sterile. It was cold. It was not a home anymore. It was a product. Dante was in the hallway holding a plastic grocery bag. He was wearing a suit, which was strange for a Saturday. He looked at me, and then he looked at his shoes. He was always looking at his shoes when things got difficult. Dad, he said, his voice low, you are wet. Don't drip on the hardwood. We just had it refinished. I looked at my son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had paid tuition for so he could get a business degree he never used properly. The boy who was now 40 years old and still letting his wife do the thinking for him. Courtney says you sold the house, I said. Dante shifted his weight. He looked like a child caught stealing cookies, but there was no sweetness here. Yeah. Well, the market is hot, Dad. Courtney has this new project, a development deal. We need the capital, and this house, it is too big for you. It is just sitting here. It is a waste of equity. Equity. He was talking about the house where he grew up as equity. So you threw my things on the lawn, I said. You threw your mother's records in the mud. It is just stuff, Dad. He said, finally looking up. His eyes were defensive. Cold. You hoard too much. It is embarrassing. The stagers said it had to go. We need a clean look. Minimalist. And where am I supposed to go, Dante? I asked. The guest room. Dante winced. He handed me the plastic bag. It contained my toothbrush, my heart medication, and a pair of socks. About that, he said. Courtney and I found a place. It is better for you. More support. Sunny Meadows. Sunny Meadows. The name sounded like a place where butterflies played. But I knew what it was. I had built the drainage system for the county 10 years ago. I knew every building in this district. Sunny Meadows was a state-run facility on the edge of the industrial park. It was where they sent people who had no money and no family. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. Sunny Meadows, I repeated. That is a hospice facility for the indigent Dante. It is within our budget, he snapped. Look, the money from the house sale. That is for our future. For Courtney's business. We cannot spend $4,000 a month on a private home for you. You have your pension. Sunny Meadows takes the pension and you get a bed. It is a fair trade. A fair trade. He was selling the house I paid for, keeping the millions, and sending me to a place that smelled of urine and despair. I am not going to Sunny Meadows, I said. You do not have a choice, Dad. Dante said, his voice hardening. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. The van is already on its way, and if you make a scene, Courtney says we call the police. You are trespassing. The title is in my name now. Remember, you signed the quitclaim deed 10 years ago for tax purposes. Legally, this is my house, and I am evicting you. I remembered. 10 years ago, when Ruby got sick, we were worried about medical bills taking the house. I trusted my son. I put his name on the deed to protect the asset for him. I thought I was giving him a legacy. I didn't know I was giving him a weapon. So that is it, I said. After everything, after 40 years. You are throwing me out like garbage. Dante looked at the door where Courtney was standing, watching us with a smirk. He straightened his spine, drawing false courage from her presence. Courtney is right, he said. You are dead weight, Dad. You are holding us back. We deserve this money. We deserve a life. You had yours. Now get out. The van will pick you up at the curb. He threw the plastic bag at my chest. I caught it. I looked at the bag. I looked at my son. And for the first time I saw him clearly. He was not weak. He was not just influenced by Courtney. He was greedy. He was cruel. And he was no longer my son. I turned around. I did not look back. I walked out the door past Courtney, who was swirling her wine, and down the steps. I walked past the pile of my ruined life on the lawn. I did not wait for the van from Sunny Meadows. I walked to the corner and hailed a taxi. Where to? The driver asked. I gave him the address of an old warehouse district on the south side of the city, a place that looked abandoned, a place where I kept my old drafting tables and a safe that hadn't been opened in 20 years. Take me to the shipyard, I said. I sat in the back of the taxi, shivering in my wet clothes. I reached into my pocket and felt the shard of glass from the picture frame. It cut my finger. A drop of blood welled up. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken my house, my dignity, and my future. They thought I was just an old man with a pension and a box of wet records. They forgot that before I was an old man, I was a man who built this city. They forgot that I knew where every pipe, every wire, and every property line was buried. And they forgot the most important thing of all. I still had the one thing they wanted most. And it wasn't the house. I took out my phone. It was an old flip phone, the kind people laughed at. But it worked. I dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. Goldman, I said when the voice answered. Silas, the voice on the other end, rasped. It sounded like gravel and whiskey. I haven't heard from you since the ribbon cutting at the bridge. I need a favor, Goldman, I said. Name it. I need you to find out who bought 54 Oak Street today. Cash offer, and I need you to look up the ground lease for that lot. There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. Silas, you know that ground lease expired yesterday. If the structure on top of it is sold without the landowner's permission. I know, I said, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time. I want you to prepare the paperwork, not for renewal, for eviction. Eviction of who, Goldman asked. Of the squatters in my house, I said. And Goldman, yeah, I'm going to need a suit. A good one. I have a funeral to attend. A funeral who died, my son, I said. He died today, he just doesn't know it yet. The sound of a high-performance engine cut through the hissing of the sprinklers. I turned my head, water dripping from the brim of my old hat, and watched as a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. It was Dante. My son. The boy I had carried on my shoulders when the parades came through town. The man I had put through college by working double shifts in the blistering heat of July and the freezing winds of February. He stepped out of the car, and for a fleeting second, a spark of hope ignited in my chest. Surely he would see this madness. Surely he would see his mother's cherished vinyl records warping in the mud, my clothes scattered like garbage, and he would put a stop to it. He would look at his wife standing on the porch with her wine glass and tell her she had gone too far. He was my blood. He was Ruby's son. But Dante did not run to me. He did not rush to shut off the water. He stepped out of the vehicle with a slow, deliberate caution, his eyes scanning the ground not to assess the damage to my life, but to navigate the puddles forming on the driveway. He was wearing a suit that cost more than I used to make in a month, Italian leather shoes that shone even under the gray sky. He stopped a few feet away from me, just out of reach of the spray from the sprinklers. He looked at the pile of wet clothes. He looked at the broken picture frame near my feet. And then he looked down at his left shoe. There was a tiny speck of mud on the toe. He sighed a sound of pure annoyance and pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket. He bent down and carefully, methodically wiped the mud from the leather. That gesture broke me more than the water ever could. It was a psychological slap in the face, loud and stinging. My life was dissolving into the dirt, and my son was worried about his footwear. "Dante," I said, my voice raspy, fighting to be heard over the mechanical rhythm of the sprinklers. "Look at this. Look at what she has done." He finished polishing his shoe before he straightened up. He put the handkerchief back in his pocket and finally looked at me, but his eyes were empty. There was no anger at Courtney. There was no sympathy for me. There was only a tired, impatient resignation, as if I were a child who had made a mess he now had to clean up. "Dad, please," he said, his voice flat. "Do not make a scene. The neighbors are watching. Make a scene." I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Dante, your wife threw everything I own onto the lawn. She destroyed your mother's records. She is treating me like an animal." "Courtney is doing what needs to be done," he replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "We talked about this, Dad. Well, we talked about the situation. The execution is just details. Details. My life was a detail. My history was a detail." "Dante, this is my home," I said, taking a step toward him. "I built the deck you are standing next to. I paid for the roof over your head. You cannot just let her do this." He took a step back, maintaining the distance between us, maintaining the barrier of his expensive suit against my wet old clothes. "It is not your home anymore, Dad," he said, and there was a coldness in his tone that I had never heard before. "It is an asset, and right now it is a distressed asset because you are cluttering it up. Courtney needs the capital. She has a vision for a new development downtown, a condo complex. It is going to put us on the map, but we need liquidity. We need to sell this place while the market is hot." I stared at him, trying to find the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, trying to find the young man who promised me he would take care of the family legacy. All I saw was a stranger wearing my son's face. "So, you are selling the house to fund her ambition?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "And what about me, Dante? Where do I fit into this new development deal?" Dante finally looked away, his gaze drifting to the porch where Courtney stood watching us, a smirk playing on her lips. He seemed to draw strength from her cruelty. "We found a place for you," he said, still looking at her. "Not me. It is better this way. You are getting older. You need care that we cannot provide. We are busy professionals, Dad. We cannot be watching you all the time." "I am perfectly healthy," I snapped. "I still consult on engineering projects. I walk 5 miles a day. I do not need watching." "You are 75, he countered, his voice rising slightly. "It is irresponsible for you to live alone in a 4-bedroom house. It is a waste of space. So we made arrangements. A van is coming to pick you up. It should be here any minute." "Pick me up for what?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "Sunny Meadows," he said. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. Sunny Meadows. Everyone in the county knew what Sunny Meadows was. It wasn't a retirement community. It wasn't a place for golden years. It was a state-subsidized warehouse for the indigent and the abandoned. It was where they sent people who had no one left to fight for them. It was a place of linoleum floors that smelled of bleach and urine, of fluorescent lights that hummed day and night, of shared rooms with strangers who screamed in their sleep. "You are sending me to the hospice," I whispered. "You are sending me to the poorhouse. It is a care facility," Dante corrected, his voice taking on a corporate edge. "And it is fully covered by your state pension. It makes financial sense, Dad. We cannot afford to pay for a private home, not with the capital we need for Courtney's project. Every dollar counts right now." I looked at him, truly looked at him. I saw the weak chin that he tried to hide with a beard. I saw the eyes that shifted and darted, unable to hold a steady gaze. I realized then that he wasn't just being manipulated by Courtney. He was a willing participant. He had done the math. He had weighed his father against a stack of cash, and I had lost. "I am not going to Sunny Meadows," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I am not leaving my house." Dante sighed a long, exasperated sound. He checked his watch. "Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be. The house is sold. The closing is happening electronically as we speak. You have no legal right to be here." "I have every right," I shouted, losing my composure for the first time. "I bought this land. I poured the foundation. My name is on the deed. Dante shook his head slowly, a look of pity crossing his face that was worse than hatred. Your memory is slipping, Dad, he said. That is exactly why you need professional care. Do you not remember? 10 years ago, after Mom died? You were so depressed. You said you didn't want to deal with the paperwork anymore. You said you wanted to make sure I was secure. I froze. I remembered. The grief had been a fog, thick and suffocating. Ruby was gone and nothing made sense. Dante had come to me with papers. He said it was to help with taxes. He said it was to protect the asset in case I got sick. He said it was just a formality. You signed the quitclaim deed, Dad, Dante said, his voice soft, almost gentle, like he was explaining something to a toddler. You transferred the title to me. Sole ownership. You wanted me to have the house. You said it was my inheritance. I trusted you. I said the words coming out as a croak. I trusted you to keep it safe. I didn't give it to you so you could throw me out on the street. And I am keeping it safe, he said. I am liquidating it to secure my future. That is what parents want for their children, isn't it? To see them succeed. Courtney and I are going to be huge, Dad. You should be proud. You are financing the next big thing in real estate. Proud. He wanted me to be proud that he was cannibalizing my life. I am not going anywhere. I repeated, planting my feet on the wet grass. This is my home. If you want me out, you will have to drag me out. Dante's face hardened. The mask of the concerned son slipped, revealing the cold, greedy stranger underneath. He took a step closer, invading my space, using his height to try and intimidate me. Don't test me, old man, he hissed. I am trying to do this nicely. I arranged for the van. I packed your bag. But if you want to play it the hard way, we can do that. He pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. I will call the police, Dad. I will tell them there is an intruder on my property, a trespasser who is refusing to leave. I have the deed. I have the title. The law is on my side. Do you really want to spend your night in a jail cell instead of a warm bed at Sunny Meadows? Do you want the neighbors to see you being handcuffed and shoved into a cruiser? Because I will do it. Do not think for a second that I won't. I looked into his eyes and saw that he meant it. He would call the police on his own father. He would humiliate me in front of the people I had lived beside for 30 years. He had stripped away every layer of loyalty, every shred of gratitude. Courtney laughed from the porch. It was a cruel, tinkling sound. Call them Dante, she shouted. He is trespassing. He is ruining the curb appeal. The photographer will be here in 20 minutes. Dante's thumb hovered over the screen. Last chance, Dad, he said. The van is turning the corner. I can see it. Get in the van, go to the home, and live out your days with a roof over your head. Or go to jail. It is your choice. I looked down the street. A white van with the Sunny Meadows logo was indeed turning onto our block. It looked like a hearse for the living. I looked back at my son. I saw the fear behind his arrogance. He was afraid I would make a scene. He was afraid I would ruin his perfect sale. He was afraid of the truth. You are right, Dante, I said, my voice suddenly calm. The water from the sprinklers dripped from my nose, but I stood tall. I stood with the posture of a man who had walked steel beams 50 stories in the air. You are absolutely right. I signed those papers. I trusted you. And that was my mistake. I stepped back, moving away from him. I will not go to jail, I said. And I will not go to Sunny Meadows. Dante looked confused. Then where are you going? Away from here, I said. Away from you. I walked over to the pile of my belongings. I didn't try to save the records. They were gone. I didn't try to gather my clothes. They were ruined. I reached down and picked up a small metal box that had fallen out of my nightstand drawer. It was locked. It was waterproof. Courtney must have thought it was just another piece of junk. What is that? Dante asked, his eyes narrowing. Nothing you would understand, I said. Just memories. I tucked the box under my arm. I walked down the driveway, past the Mercedes, past my son, who was already pulling out his phone to call the landscaping crew to clean up the mess. The Sunny Meadows van pulled up to the curb. The driver rolled down the window. Silas Vance, he asked. I looked at the driver. No, I said. Silas Vance doesn't live here anymore. I kept walking. I heard Dante shouting something behind me, probably telling the driver to wait, but I didn't stop. I walked until I reached the corner. I walked until the house was out of sight. I walked until the anger in my chest settled into a cold, focused determination. They thought they had stripped me bare. They thought they had taken my shelter and my pride, but they had forgotten who I was. I was a man who knew how to build things, and more importantly, I was a man who knew how to demolish them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking not from cold but from adrenaline. I dialed the number of the one man I knew could help me navigate the wreckage of my life. "Goldman," I said when he answered. "It's Silas." Silas Goldman's voice was raspy, surprised. "It's been years. I need you to look something up for me," I said, watching the traffic pass by. "Anything. The land lease for 54 Oak Street, the original contract from 1980. There was a pause on the line. I could hear him shuffling papers, the click of a mouse. "Silas," he said slowly, "you know that lease had a 99-year term but with a specific clause for early termination if the primary resident changes without the landowner's consent." "I know," I said. "I wrote that clause." "And you know the renewal date was yesterday." "I know that too." Goldman let out a low whistle. "If the lease wasn't renewed and the property ownership transferred, Silas, under the terms of that contract, the structure reverts to the landowner." "Exactly," I said. "Who holds the land deed, Silas?" "I thought you transferred everything to your son." "I transferred the house," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. "Just the house. The bricks, the wood, the glass, but the dirt underneath it, the ground it stands on, that belongs to the Vance Family Trust, and I am the sole trustee." "My God," Goldman whispered, "you still own the land." "I do," I said, "and I think I have a squatter on my property. What do you want to do?" "I want to evict him," I said, "but not just yet. He thinks he sold the house today. He thinks he has a cash buyer. I want let him finish the sale. I want him to sign the papers. I want him to take the money. And then when he thinks he is rich, when he thinks he has won, I want to pull the ground out from under him. Literally. You want to serve him with a notice of land reclamation?" "No," I said. "I want to serve him with a demolition order. If the structure is unauthorized, the landowner has the right to remove it. Silas, that is nuclear." He threw my wife's pictures in the mud. "Goldman. He tried to put me in a pauper's hospice. Nuclear is the only option I have left." "I'll get the paperwork ready," Goldman said. "Good." And Goldman, "Yeah. Find out who the buyer is. I have a feeling I might know them." I hung up the phone. I stood on the corner, wet, cold, and homeless. But I wasn't helpless. Dante thought he had played a masterstroke with the quitclaim deed. He thought he knew the law. But he forgot the first rule of construction. You never build on land you don't own. He had just sold a house that was sitting on my land. He had committed fraud on a massive scale, and he had done it all while treating me like trash. I hailed a taxi. I wasn't going to Sunny Meadows. I was going to the only place where I still had power, the archives. I needed the original blueprints. I needed the land surveys. I was going to build a case so strong that when it fell on him, it would crush him completely. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back one last time in the direction of my house. I could imagine Dante and Courtney inside, toasting with their white wine, laughing about the old man they had disposed of. They were celebrating their victory. "Enjoy the champagne, son," I whispered, "because the hangover is going to be lethal." I sat in the back of the taxi, shivering as the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked window. The driver, a man with gray stubble and tired eyes, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why a 75-year-old man in a soaking wetsuit was heading to the industrial district at nightfall. He did not ask, and I did not offer an explanation. The cold from my damp clothes had seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my chest. My son Dante had not just evicted me, he had erased me. He stood there in his Italian leather shoes, wiping a speck of mud, while his wife destroyed 40 years of my history. And then he tried to put me in a van bound for a place called Sunny Meadows. The name sounded pleasant enough, like a place where you would drink lemonade on a porch. But I knew better. In my line of work, you learn to look at the foundation, not the paint job. I needed to know exactly what kind of hell they had tried to sentence me to. The taxi slowed as we entered the old shipyard district. This was the part of the city that the new money had not touched yet. It was grit and steel and old brick. I had laid the sewage lines for these streets back in 1982. I knew the skeleton of this city better than the people who claimed to own it. We pulled up to a corrugated metal building that looked abandoned to the untrained eye. To me, it was a sanctuary. It was where I kept the things that actually mattered. The blueprints, the schematics, the history of a career spent building things that lasted. I paid the driver with the damp cash from my wallet and stepped out into the cool night air. The heavy metal door groaned as I unlocked it, the sound echoing in the empty street. Inside, the air was stale and smelled of dust and old paper, but to me it smelled like safety. I flipped the breaker switch and the overhead industrial lights flickered to life, humming with a low buzz that felt like company. I walked past rows of filing cabinets and drafting tables covered in sheets. This was my archive, my legacy. Dante thought my legacy was the house on Oak Street. He thought it was the equity he could strip mine to fund Courtney's vanity projects. He had no idea. I stripped off my wet jacket and hung it on a chair. I was shivering violently now, but I could not rest. Not yet. I went to the corner of the room where an old sturdy desk sat covered in a layer of dust. On it was a laptop I hadn't used in 2 years. I prayed it still had a charge. I plugged it in and waited, my breath forming small clouds in the cold air of the warehouse. The screen flickered to life. The glow was harsh in the dim room. My fingers, stiff with cold and arthritis, hovered over the keyboard. Sunny Meadows Care Facility. I typed the name and hit enter. I expected to see a brochure, maybe some photos of smiling seniors playing bingo. What I found made my blood run cold and stopped my shivering instantly. The first result was not a website. It was a news article from 6 months ago. State investigation launched into neglect at local indigent facility. I clicked the link. The words on the screen hit me like physical blows. Overcrowding, malnutrition, uncertified staff. The article detailed a place that wasn't a home. It was a holding pen, a warehouse for the dying. It described patients left in soiled sheets for hours, medication errors, a mortality rate that was 3 times the state average. I scrolled down, reading the comments from families of former patients. They were horror stories. My mother went in walking and was dead in a week from a treatable infection, one read. They stole her wedding ring and told us she lost it. Another said, it is a hellhole run by the state for people with 0 assets. A third comment warned, do not send your loved ones here if you have any other choice. I sat back in the creaky office chair, my hand covering my mouth. This wasn't just a cheap nursing home, this was a death sentence. Dante hadn't just tried to downsize me, he had tried to dispose of me. I did the math in my head. A decent private facility cost about $5,000 a month. Sunny Meadows was state-funded for the indigent. It cost the family nothing if they surrendered the patient's pension checks. Dante knew my pension. He knew exactly how much I brought in. By sending me there, he would save himself and Courtney about $60,000 a year. $60,000. That was the price of my life. That was the price of my dignity. My son had looked at me, the man who taught him to tie his shoes, the man who sat up with him when he had fevers, the man who paid for his first suit and decided I wasn't worth the cost of a decent room. He was willing to send me to a place where I would rot in a bed smelling of bleach and neglect, just to keep his capital liquid for Courtney's development deal. A sound escaped my throat, a low, guttural noise that was half sob and half growl. I thought I had reached the bottom when I saw my photos in the mud. But this was lower. This was the basement of the soul. Dante didn't just not love me. He viewed me as a liability to be written off. He was willing to let me die to protect his profit margin. I looked around the warehouse. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, reaching for me. I felt small. I felt old. For a moment, I just wanted to close my eyes and let the cold take me. Maybe Sunny Meadows was where I belonged. Maybe I was just trash, like Courtney said. But then I looked at the drafting table across the room. On it lay the rolled-up plans for the Crosstown Suspension Bridge. I had been the lead structural engineer on that project. I had fought the city council for 2 years to get the funding for reinforced steel because I knew the wind shear in the valley was stronger than their charts showed. They called me stubborn. They called me difficult. But I won. And 5 years later, when the hurricane hit, that bridge was the only one that didn't sway an inch. I was not trash. I was Silas Vance, and I did not build things that collapsed. The sadness in my chest began to harden. It cooled and solidified, turning into something heavy and sharp. Rage. Cold, calculated engineers' rage. They wanted to play the numbers game. They wanted to talk about assets and liabilities. Fine, I could play that game, and I had been playing it since before they were born. I stood up, my knees popping. I walked to the center of the warehouse. The floor was concrete stained with oil and time. but I knew every inch of this floor because I had poured it myself. I walked to a spot that looked like nothing, just a random patch of concrete under a heavy metal shelving unit filled with rusty paint cans. I shoved the shelf aside. The metal screeched against the floor, echoing like a scream. Underneath was a rug covered in decades of dust. I kicked the rug away. There, flush with the concrete, was a steel square, a floor safe. I knelt down. The cold of the concrete seeped through my trousers, but I didn't feel it. I spun the dial. Left to 30, right to 19, left to 47. Ruby's birthday. The date we bought our first plot of land. The date I became a free man. The tumblers clicked. A sound as sweet as jazz. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside there was money. Stacks of cash wrapped in plastic bands. Emergency funds I had stashed away over 30 years of contracting. Gold coins I had bought when the market crashed in '87. Enough money to buy a condo in Florida and disappear. Enough money to pay for the best private nursing home in the state for 10 years. Dante would have killed for this safe. Courtney would have drowned me in the bathtub to get the combination. But I didn't reach for the money. The money was just insulation. It was just padding. I reached past the cash, past the gold, to the bottom of the safe. My hand closed around a thick leather-bound book. It was heavy. It smelled of old paper and binding glue. I pulled it out and blew the dust off the cover. The gold lettering was faded but still legible. City Land Registry and Lease Ledger, 1980. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't just a book. This was the bomb. This was the nuclear option I had told my lawyer Goldman about. You see, back in the 70s and 80s, when this part of the city was nothing but mud and crime, nobody wanted the land. The city was practically giving it away to anyone who promised to develop it. But they had a unique zoning law. To encourage development without selling off the city's future assets, they created 99-year ground leases. You could buy the house, you could buy the building, but the dirt underneath it remained with the original leaseholder. Most people bought out the leases in the 90s when the market boomed. They paid thousands to own the land their houses sat on. But some didn't. Some forgot. And some, like the previous owner of 54 Oak Street, signed a specific clause that gave the leaseholder the right of reversion. I opened the book. The pages crinkled. I flipped through the handwritten entries until I found it. Lot 54B, Oak Street District. There it was. My signature. Silas Vance. And the date. And the terms. I owned the land. I had always owned the land. When I transferred the house to Dante 10 years ago, I transferred the structure, the improvements, the bricks and mortar. But I never transferred the ground lease. I kept it in the Vance family trust. A trust that Dante didn't even know existed because he never bothered to ask about my business affairs. He thought I was just a laborer who got lucky. He didn't know I was the one who drew the maps. I ran my finger over the clause in the ledger. Clause 14, reversion of asset. In the event of an unauthorized transfer of the structural asset or failure to renew the ground lease upon expiration, the landowner reserves the right to reclaim the land and all improvements thereon. I looked at the date of expiration. Yesterday, the lease expired yesterday. And Dante had sold the house today. He had sold a house that was sitting on land he didn't own with a lease that had just defaulted. He had sold a house that, legally speaking, now belonged to me again. I closed the book with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the empty warehouse like a gavel coming down. They wanted to send me to Sunny Meadows. They wanted to put me in a room with 3 other dying men and wait for my heart to stop so they could cash the rest of my checks. They wanted to erase Silas Vance. Well, Silas Vance was about to become the biggest problem of their lives. I stood up, holding the ledger against my chest. I grabbed a stack of cash from the safe. $5,000. I was going to need a tailor. I was going to need a barber. And I was going to need a very expensive bottle of scotch for Goldman. I wasn't going to hide in this warehouse. I wasn't going to mourn the son I lost. I was going to stage a comeback. I walked over to the small bathroom in the corner of the warehouse. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. My eyes were red. My gray hair was plastered to my skull. I looked like a drowned rat. I looked like a victim. I splashed cold water on my face. I scrubbed the dirt from my skin. I straightened my spine until my back cracked. I looked at myself again. The victim was gone. In his place was the man who built the crosstown bridge, the man who laid the foundation for the skyline. Dante wants an open house, I whispered to the empty room. He wants to show off his asset. I picked up the ledger. I think I will attend. After all, it is rude to sell a man's house without inviting the landlord. I turned off the lights in the warehouse. The darkness swallowed the drafting tables and the filing cabinets, but I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I was the one bringing the storm. I stepped out into the night, the ledger tucked under my arm, the cash in my pocket. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and cold. I hailed another taxi. Where to, the driver asked. The Four Seasons, I said. I have some preparation to do. The driver looked at me, at my wet clothes, my old shoes. You got money to pay for that, pal? He asked, skeptical. I pulled out $100 bill from the stack in my pocket and handed it to him through the partition. Drive, I said, and turn up the music. I have some thinking to do. As we drove away from the warehouse, I thought about Dante and Courtney. They were probably celebrating right now, opening a bottle of expensive champagne in the house they thought they had sold, laughing about how easy it was to get rid of the old man. Let them laugh. Let them drink. Let them toast to their victory. Because tomorrow I was going to turn their champagne into vinegar. I was going to turn their victory into a foreclosure. And I was going to show them that you never, ever treat the man who holds the deed like he is the tenant. Sunny Meadows. I shook my head. My son was going to learn that the only person going to a state facility was him, and it wouldn't be a nursing home. It would be a penitentiary. I leaned back in the seat, clutching the ledger. The city lights rushed by, a blur of gold and red. I was Silas Vance, and I was coming home. The sun came up over the city skyline, filtering through the high-end drapes of the Four Seasons suite, but it brought no warmth to my bones. I had spent $500 on a room I barely slept in, spending the night sitting in a wingback chair staring at the city lights and running my thumb over the leather spine of the land registry ledger. My body was stiff, my joints aching from the cold dampness of the warehouse the night before, but there was a sharper pain, a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with heartbreak. It was physical, a squeezing pressure that radiated down my left arm. I reached into my pocket for the small plastic pill organizer I usually carried, but my fingers brushed only lint and the cold shard of glass from the broken picture frame. My medication, my beta blockers, and the blood thinners that kept my heart rhythm steady. They were still in the plastic bag. Dante had packed the bag I had left on the sidewalk in my moment of defiant exit. Or perhaps he had taken it back inside. Either way, I did not have them. And without them, the stress of the last 24 hours was becoming a literal threat to my life. I stood up, steadied myself against the heavy mahogany desk, and checked my reflection in the mirror. The tailor at the hotel had done wonders with the suit I bought late last night, emergency fitting at exorbitant rates, but money was the one tool I still had in abundance. I looked sharp. I looked like the man I used to be when I commanded crews of 200 men. But my eyes were red-rimmed and my skin had a grayish pallor that I recognized from the days before my bypass surgery. I needed those pills. I checked my watch. 7:30 in the morning. The open house. The grand spectacle my daughter-in-law was planning wasn't scheduled until noon. I had time. I would go back, get my medication, perhaps salvage a few more documents from my safe in the study, and leave before the circus began. They wouldn't deny an old man his heart medicine. Even Dante, for all his greed, wouldn't want a corpse on the living room floor right before a sale. It would be bad for property value. I took the elevator down the silence of the luxury hotel, feeling miles away from the chaos of my life. I hailed a cab, the morning air biting at my face. "Take me to 54 Oak Street," I told the driver. The ride was short, but my anxiety mounted with every block. We turned onto Oak Street, the street I had helped pave in '82, the street where I had taught Dante to ride a bicycle without training wheels. It was quiet, the Sunday morning calm that I used to love. But as we approached number 54, the calm shattered. There were no birds singing, there were no sprinklers hissing. There was only the flashing blue and red lights of a police cruiser parked diagonally across my driveway, blocking access to the garage. A second cruiser was parked at the curb. My heart gave a painful thud, a skipped beat that made me gasp. Had something happened? Had there been an accident? For a split second, the father in me panicked. Was Dante hurt? But then I saw the yellow caution tape. It wasn't crime scene tape, it was property line tape. And standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses that were too big for her face, was Courtney. She wasn't crying, she wasn't distressed. She was directing a police officer toward the front door of my house. I told the driver to stop. I threw cash at him and got out before the car had fully ceased moving. I walked toward them, my cane clicking rhythmically on the pavement. I didn't need the cane to walk, not really, but today it felt like a weapon, a scepter of authority. Officer, I called out, my voice booming with the projection I had learned over decades on noisy construction sites. What is the meaning of this? The officer. A young man with a buzz cut and a hand resting instinctively on his belt turned around. He looked at me, then looked at a paper on his clipboard, then back at me. His posture shifted from relaxed to alert. Sir, stop right there, he commanded, holding up a hand. Are you Silas Vance? I am Silas Vance, I said, continuing to walk. I own this house. I need to get my medication from inside. Stop, the officer barked, stepping onto the sidewalk to block my path. He was big, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who was used to being obeyed. Sir, I am ordering you to halt. You are in violation of a court order. I stopped 10 feet from him. The tightness in my chest increased. Court order. What are you talking about? I live here. Not anymore, Mr. Vance, the officer said. He pulled a folded document from his clipboard. We have an emergency ex parte restraining order issued by Judge Hamilton late last night. It bars you from coming within 500 feet of this property or having any contact with Mrs. Courtney Vance or Mr. Dante Vance. I stared at him, the words not making sense. A restraining order. Those were for stalkers, for violent ex-husbands, for criminals. On what grounds, I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The officer glanced at the paper, his expression hardening. The petition states that yesterday afternoon you became violent and erratic. It claims you destroyed property on the front lawn in a fit of rage. It states that you threatened to burn the house down rather than let it be sold, and... He paused, looking up at me with a mixture of pity and caution. It states that you are suffering from advanced dementia and pose an immediate physical threat to the occupants and yourself. The world tilted on its axis. I looked past the officer's shoulder. Courtney was watching us. She took a sip from a travel coffee mug, her face a mask of tragic concern. She was playing the victim. She had taken the destruction she caused, the clothes she threw on the lawn, the picture frame she stomped on, and she had twisted it. She had told the judge that I did it, that I was the one who snapped. That is a lie. I said, my voice shaking not with fear but with a fury so hot it felt like it could melt the asphalt. My daughter-in-law threw my things out. She destroyed my property. I came here to get my heart medication. If I don't take it, I could go into cardiac arrest. The officer's face softened slightly, but he didn't move. Sir, I can't let you in. The order is specific, immediate removal and barring of access. If you have medical needs, I can call an ambulance, but you cannot enter this domicile. I looked at the house. My house. I laid the brick for that porch. I reinforced the load-bearing walls in the living room when we renovated in '95. I knew the house breathed, and now I was being told by a stranger with a badge that I was a danger to it. Dante, I shouted, looking up at the second-floor window where the master bedroom was. Dante, get down here. Tell them the truth. The curtains moved. I saw a shadow, a face. It was my son. He was watching. He saw his 75-year-old father being blocked by police. He saw me clutching my chest, and he let the curtain fall back into place. He hid. He is scared of you, sir, the officer said, stepping closer. Please, don't make me arrest you. You are already trespassing. We are here to supervise the securing of the property. Securing the property. I looked at the front door. Another officer was applying a padlock to the handle. They were sealing it. They weren't just kicking me out, they were treating the house like a crime scene where I was the perpetrator. Courtney walked down the driveway, staying safely behind the line of police officers. She looked at me, adjusting her sunglasses. We are just trying to get you help, Silas, she said. Her voice loud enough for the officers to hear, dripping with fake concern. You aren't well. You threatened Dante. You said crazy things about destroying us. We couldn't take the risk. The judge agreed that you need supervision. She was building a narrative. She wasn't just stealing my house, she was stealing my credibility. She was painting me as a senile, violent old man so that when I tried to fight back, no one would believe me. It was tactical. It was brilliant. It was evil. I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see a family member. I saw an enemy combatant. I do not have dementia, Courtney. I said, my voice steady and cold. And I did not threaten to burn the house down. But you are right about one thing. She cocked her head, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, and what is that? I am going to take you apart, I said. Not with fire, but brick by brick. Threats will not help your case, sir, the officer warned, placing a hand on his taser. It is not a threat, officer, I said, turning my gaze to him. It is an engineering promise. I reached into my jacket pocket. The officer tensed, thinking I was reaching for a weapon. I pulled out a business card. It was from the law firm of Goldman Sachs and Klein, not the bank, the sharks. Officer, I said, I am leaving. I will not violate your order, but I want you to log something in your report. The officer blinked, surprised by my sudden shift in tone. What is that note that I was denied access to life-saving medication by the occupants of this house despite my request? Note that the property owners are aware of my heart condition. If I suffer a cardiac event in the next 24 hours, this report will be Exhibit A in a negligent homicide trial. Courtney's smile faltered. The officer looked at her, then back at me. I will note that, sir, he said. I nodded. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the house I built, the son I raised, and the life I had known. The pain in my chest was a dull throb, a constant reminder of my mortality. But my mind was crystal clear. They wanted to use the law. Fine. I knew the law. I knew permits. I knew zoning. I knew contracts. They had fired the first shot with a restraining order. They thought that would send me cowering into the shadows, ashamed and confused. They didn't know Silas Vance. You don't survive 30 years in the construction business in this city by being soft. You survive by knowing where the bodies are buried, and more importantly, by knowing who owns the shovel. I walked back to the waiting taxi, my cane tapping a rhythm of war on the pavement. I didn't look back at the window where my coward of a son was hiding. He had made his choice. He had chosen the side of the usurper. As I climbed into the car, I pulled out the heavy leather-bound ledger I had retrieved from the warehouse. I opened it to the page dated 1980. The ink was faded, but the signature was bold. Ground lease, Lot 54B. I ran my finger over the expiration date. Yesterday. Courtney thought she had won because she had a piece of paper from a judge saying I couldn't go home. She didn't realize that she was standing on land that didn't belong to her. She was trying to sell a castle built on sand, and I was the one who controlled the tide. Take me to the pharmacy, I told the driver. And then take me to the biggest law office in the city. I had a heart attack to prevent and an empire to demolish. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was an eviction. And I was the landlord from hell. The smell of Goldman's office was the first thing that told me I was safe, or at least that I was in a fortress where the enemy could not reach me. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, old leather, and the sharp metallic scent of ink. It was a smell from a different era, an era when business was done with a handshake and a look in the eye, not with electronic transfers and restraining orders. I sat in the wingback chair across from his desk, the leather creaking under my weight. I was still wearing the suit I had bought the night before, but now it felt less like armor and more like a costume. I felt heavy. The adrenaline from the confrontation with the police had faded, replaced by a cold, aching clarity. Goldman poured 2 glasses of scotch. He didn't ask if I wanted one. He knew. He slid the glass across the mahogany desk. It was a desk we had sat at 30 years ago when we structured the liability insurance for the riverfront project. Goldman was 80 years old with skin like parchment and eyes like a hawk that had seen every kind of rodent the city had to offer. He was small, shrunken by age, but his mind was still a bear trap. You look like you went 12 rounds with a cement mixer, Silas, he rasped, taking a sip of his drink. I feel like I got poured into the foundation, I replied, taking the glass. The liquid burned on the way down, a welcome fire in my cold chest. They got a restraining order, Goldman. My daughter-in-law. She told the judge I was violent. She told him I had dementia. Goldman let out a noise that was half laugh, half cough. Dementia. You can still recite the load-bearing capacity of a steel I-beam from memory. Standard procedure for a hostile takeover, Silas, he said, his voice dropping to a professional growl. Discredit the owner, isolate the target, seize control of the assets before the target can mount a defense. She is running a textbook play. Who is her lawyer? Some kid named Sterling, I said. Goldman nodded. I know him. He is flashy, expensive. He likes to make noise. But he doesn't read the footnotes. We do. He leaned forward, pushing a stack of files aside. I pulled the land lease records like you asked. You were right. The ground lease for 54 Oak Street expired 48 hours ago. Technically, that house is trespassing on your land right now. We can file for eviction based on that alone. But Silas, if they are this aggressive, if they are locking you out and calling the cops, it means they are desperate. People with money don't act like cornered rats. People who are broke do. I nodded. That was what my gut had been telling me. The rush to sell the house. The cheap nursing home. It wasn't just greed. It was panic. We need to follow the money, Goldman, I said. I need to know why they are bleeding. Goldman turned to his computer. It was a new machine looking out of place in the ancient office, but Goldman knew how to use it better than men half his age. I have access to the joint accounts, he said. The ones you set up with Dante 5 years ago. Remember when you had the pacemaker put in? You wanted him to have signature authority in case you were incapacitated. I remembered. I remembered sitting in this very office signing the papers. I remembered looking at Dante and telling him, "Son, this is for emergencies. This is the family safety net. It is not for spending. It is for saving." He had nodded, his eyes wide and solemn. "I promise, Dad," he had said. "I won't touch a dime unless it is for you." "Open it," I said. "Let's see what is left." Goldman typed in the credentials. The silence in the room stretched heavy and suffocating. I heard the click of the mouse, then another click, and then silence. Goldman didn't say anything. He just took off his glasses and cleaned them with his tie. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "How much should be in there, Silas?" he asked softly. "The principal was $400,000, I said, doing the math in my head, plus the compound interest over 5 years and the deposits from the patent royalties on that drainage valve I designed in '92. It should be close to $550,000. Goldman put his glasses back on. "Silas," he said, "there is $400.12. The air left the room. I sat there staring at the brass lamp on his desk. $500,000, $500,000. 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. 40 years of breathing concrete dust. 40 years of missed dinners and working weekends. Gone. When I asked, my voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollow. Goldman started scrolling. "It started 18 months ago," he said, reading the data like an autopsy report. "Small withdrawals at first. 500 here, 1,000 there. ATM withdrawals at casinos." "Casinos?" I asked. Dante didn't gamble. At least I didn't think he did. "Online, mostly," Goldman said. "Look at these merchant codes. Golden Palace, Lucky Strike, crypto exchange transfers." He was chasing losses, Silas. It looks like he started losing big about a year ago. The withdrawals got larger. 10,000, 20,000. He was bleeding out and he was using your life savings as a tourniquet. I closed my eyes. I could see Dante's face, the way he looked at his shoes when he evicted me. It wasn't just shame, it was guilt. $500,000 worth of guilt. He hadn't just sold my house because Courtney wanted a new project. He had sold it because he had stolen my safety net and needed to replace the money before I found out. He was trying to fill the hole he dug with the bricks of my home. But wait, Goldman said, his eyes narrowing. Here is something else. These aren't gambling debts. I opened my eyes. What is it? In the last 6 months, the pattern changes, he said. The gambling stops. But the money keeps leaving. Big chunks. 50,000, 75,000. Wire transfers. To who? Goldman clicked a few more keys. Shell companies, he muttered. LLCs with generic names. Blue Horizon Consulting. Skyline Ventures. But look at the registered agent for Skyline Ventures. He turned the screen toward me. I leaned in, squinting at the bright light. There, in black and white, was the name. Courtney Miller Vance, my daughter-in-law. She was siphoning the money, Goldman said, his voice hard. Dante was gambling it away at first, yes, but then she stepped in. She didn't stop him. She joined him. She set up these shell companies and had him transfer the remaining balance to her. She drained the account dry, Silas. She stole your retirement to fund, what, her lifestyle, her business, or maybe she is just stashing it away. It hit me then. The cruelty. The way she threw my things on the lawn. It wasn't just that she didn't like me. It was that she needed me gone. As long as I was around, as long as I had access to the accounts, I was a threat. I was the witness to a crime they had already committed. They needed me in Sunny Meadows because in Sunny Meadows, no one checks bank statements. In Sunny Meadows, you are just a number until you expire. They stole everything, I whispered. Goldman slammed his hand on the desk. It made me jump. No, he barked. They stole cash. Cash is paper. Cash is temporary. They didn't steal your name, they didn't steal the land, and they sure as hell didn't steal me. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of bourbon older and darker than the scotch. He poured a splash into my glass. "Drink that," he ordered. I drank it. "Now listen to me," Silas Goldman said, leaning over the desk, his eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 courtroom battles. "This is not a family dispute anymore. This is grand larceny. This is elder abuse. This is wire fraud. We can go to the district attorney right now. We can have them arrested before dinner." I looked at the empty glass in my hand. I thought about Dante in handcuffs. I thought about the boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. Now he was the monster. But if I arrested them, if I sent them to jail, I would just be the old man who got robbed by his family. The world would look at me with pity. Poor Silas. His son took him for everything. I didn't want pity. I wanted respect. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to feel the ground shake. "No police," I said. "Not yet." Goldman looked at me surprised. "Silas, they took $500,000. I know," I said, "and I will get it back. But if we arrest them now, the money is gone. It is spent. It is hidden. If we arrest them, the sale of the house stops. The assets freeze. So I want them to sell the house." I said, the plan forming in my mind like a bridge taking shape across a chasm. I want them to think they got away with it. I want them to think the money is theirs. I want Courtney to feel safe. I want her to feel victorious. "Why?" Goldman asked. "Because when you are building a demolition charge, Goldman, you don't set it off when the building is empty," I said. "You wait until the pressure is at its highest." I looked at the screen at the list of transfers that represented my life's work. "Dante transferred the money to Courtney's LLC, right?" I asked. "Yes, Skyline Ventures. And Skyline Ventures is a registered business entity in this state." "Yes." Which means, I said, leaning forward, that if Skyline Ventures enters into a contract, its assets are liable. Goldman smiled. It was a slow, predatory smile that revealed a lot of gold teeth. "I see where you are going, Silas." "Courtney is a real estate agent," I said. "She is obsessed with image. She wants to be a developer. She wants to play in the big leagues. She thinks she is selling my house for $3 million cash." Goldman nodded. "I want to buy the house," I said. Goldman choked on his bourbon. "You want to—" "What, I want to buy the house?" I repeated. "But not as Silas Vance. I want to buy it through a shell company. I want you to set it up, make it look international, make it look flashy. A mysterious investor who wants the property immediately. Offer them more than the asking price. Offer them $3.5 million, cash." "Silas, you don't have $3.5 million liquid," Goldman said. "You have wealth, but it is tied up in the land trusts and bonds." "I know," I said, "but I don't need to pay them. I just need them to sign the contract. I need them to sign a contract that puts everything they have, including the assets of Skyline Ventures, as collateral against the delivery of the title. A title they cannot deliver because the ground lease has expired." Goldman's eyes widened. He started tapping his fingers on the desk. "If they sign a contract promising to deliver clear title to the land and the structure," he muttered, thinking out loud, "and they fail to deliver because the land reverts to you, they are in breach of contract. And if the contract has a liquidated damages clause that targets their assets, we can take everything I finished. We can take the money she stole from me. We can take the money she has hidden. We can take her car. We can take her business license. It is a trap," Goldman said. "A $3.5 million mousetrap." "Will you do it?" I asked. Goldman looked at the computer screen at the evidence of my son's betrayal. He looked at me, his old friend sitting there in a hotel suit with no home to go to. He picked up the phone. "I'll set up the LLC today," he said. "We will call it Nemesis Holdings." "No," I said. "Call it Ruby Properties." Goldman paused. He nodded. "Ruby Properties. I will get a proxy to make the offer. Someone they don't know. Someone who looks like money." And Goldman, "Yes, find out where Dante is spending his time. If he is not gambling online anymore, he is doing something else. A man with that much guilt doesn't just sit at home." I stood up. The pain in my chest had subsided, replaced by the cold fire of the mission. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the architect of their ruin. I walked to the window of Goldman's office and looked down at the city. I could see the rooftops of the buildings I had helped raise. I could see the streets I had paved. They thought I was old. They thought I was finished. They forgot that concrete takes time to set, but once it does, it is harder than stone. I'm going to get my pills, Goldman, I said. I have a prescription at the pharmacy on 5th, and then I'm going to get a haircut. If I am going to buy a house, I need to look the part. Goldman laughed. Go get 'em, Silas. And hey, I turned at the door. Don't die on me, he said. I want to see the look on her face when the gavel drops. I won't die, I said, not until the job is done. I walked out of the office. The smell of cigars faded, replaced by the crisp air of the hallway. I pressed the button for the elevator. Dante had drained the account. Courtney had built a shell game. They thought they were smart. They thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. But they didn't realize one thing. They were playing on my board, and I was about to flip the table. I stepped into the elevator and watched the numbers count down. $500,000. I would get every cent back, and then I would take the rest. Not because I needed it, but because they needed to learn that you do not steal from the man who pours the concrete. You do not steal from the father who gave you everything. The doors opened to the lobby. I walked out into the bustling city. I had work to do. The next morning, I wasn't wearing the $5,000 suit. I was wearing a pair of faded blue coveralls with the name Vance Construction stitched over the pocket in red thread. They were old, stained with decades of grease and paint, and they smelled faintly of turpentine. I pulled a gray cap low over my eyes and picked up a mop bucket and a squeegee I had bought at a hardware store. Courtney worked at Prestige Realty, a high-end firm located on the 30th floor of the monolithic glass tower downtown. It was a building I knew intimately because I had supervised the pouring of its sub-basement foundation in 1998. I knew the service elevators, I knew the ventilation shafts, and I knew that at 6:30 in the morning the cleaning crews were the only ones with access to the executive suites. I walked into the service entrance, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The security guard, a young man glued to his phone, barely looked up. He saw the coveralls, the bucket, and the gray hair, and he saw nothing. I was invisible. Just another old man cleaning up other people's messes. I took the freight elevator up to the 30th floor. The doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a hallway lined with plush carpet and modern art that cost more than most people made in a year. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the HVAC system. I moved quickly. I wasn't there to clean. I was there to plant a bug. Goldman had given me a tiny high-tech listening device smaller than a button. Put it somewhere she won't look, he had said. Somewhere personal. I found Courtney's office. It was the corner suite, of course, with a view of the river. Her desk was a slab of white marble cluttered with awards and framed photos of her smiling next to minor celebrities. There was a photo of her and Dante on their wedding day, but it was pushed to the back behind a stack of brochures. I scanned the room. Where would she never look? My eyes landed on her designer handbag. A Birkin that probably cost 20 grand sitting on a side table. No, too risky. She carried that everywhere. I needed something stationary, but close. Then I saw it. A large potted orchid on her desk. It was an expensive, rare variety, the kind you watered with an eyedropper. Courtney loved that plant. She posted photos of it on social media constantly. I walked over to the plant. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of what I was doing. I buried the tiny device in the moss at the base of the orchid, covering it carefully. It was invisible. I was about to leave when I heard the ding of the elevator down the hall. Voices, laughter, panic surged through me. It was too early for the staff. I looked at the clock on the wall. 6:45. Who was here? I grabbed my mop and bucket and ducked into the small ensuite bathroom attached to her office. I left the door cracked just a hair. The office door opened. So did he sign the papers? A deep, smooth voice asked. Not yet, but he will. He is desperate. He thinks this sale is going to save his life. It was Courtney. Her voice was different than the one she used with Dante. It was sharper, crueler, and she wasn't alone. I peeked through the crack. Courtney walked in, followed by a man I recognized instantly. It was Sterling. The lawyer Goldman had warned me about, the flashy shark who was handling the restraining order against me. But he wasn't acting like her lawyer. He was standing too close. His hand was resting on the small of her back in a way that was entirely unprofessional. He is a useful idiot, isn't he? Sterling laughed, walking over to the window. Your husband, I mean. He is a means to an end, Courtney said, sitting on the edge of her desk, her legs crossed. She picked up a pen and tapped it against her lips. Once the house sells, once the wire hits the account, I am filing for divorce. I already have the papers drawn up. Irreconcilable differences. And the money, Sterling asked, turning to face her. The money goes into the offshore account we set up, she said, smiling. Skyline Ventures. Dante thinks it is a joint holding for our development project. He doesn't know I am the sole signatory. Once the funds clear, I am transferring everything to the Cayman account. And then Sterling asked, stepping closer to her. And then you and I are going to Bali, she whispered. First class. One way. And Dante can rot in that miserable apartment with his guilt and his deadbeat father's debts. My grip on the mop handle tightened until my knuckles turned white. Bali. She was planning to run. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was stealing from Dante, too. She was going to leave him destitute, facing the legal fallout of the fraudulent sale while she sipped cocktails on a beach with her lawyer lover. And what about the old man? Sterling asked. What if he causes trouble? Silas. Courtney laughed. It was a sound that made my skin crawl. He is a non-issue. The restraining order scared him off. He is probably wandering the streets right now talking to pigeons. By the time anyone figures out what happened, we will be gone. And even if he tries to fight, who is going to believe a senile 75-year-old against a respectable lawyer and a top real estate agent? We have the narrative, baby. We have the power. Sterling leaned in and kissed her. It was a long, passionate kiss right there in the office where she kept a picture of her husband hidden behind brochures. I felt a wave of nausea. This was the woman Dante had chosen over me. This was the woman he had thrown me out for. She didn't love him. She despised him. She saw him as a wallet to be emptied and discarded. They broke apart. We should get to work, Courtney said, smoothing her skirt. The open house is at noon. I need to make sure the staging is perfect. I heard footsteps. They were leaving, but then Sterling stopped. Wait, he said. What is that smell? I froze. The smell. Turpentine. My coveralls. It smells like chemicals, Courtney said, sniffing the air. Like cleaning supplies. The cleaning crew must have just been here, Sterling said. Sloppy. He walked toward the bathroom door. My heart stopped. I held my breath, pressing myself against the tiled wall, clutching the mop like a club. If he opened the door, if he saw me. He reached for the handle. Babe, leave it, Courtney called out. We don't have time. I need to go over the disclosure forms before the buyers arrive. Sterling paused. He let go of the handle. You are right, he said. Let's go make some money. They walked out of the office. The door clicked shut. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. My legs were shaking. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to be sure. Then I stepped out of the bathroom. I looked at the orchid on the desk. The bug was safe. The trap was set. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. They thought I was a non-issue. They thought I was talking to pigeons. They had no idea. I wasn't just listening anymore. I was recording. I had the confession. I had the motive. And I had the proof of the affair. I put my cap back on and walked out of the office, pushing my mop bucket. I took the service elevator down, nodding to the delivery guys who ignored me. I walked out into the bright morning sun. I stripped off the coveralls in an alleyway and stuffed them into a trash can. I smoothed my shirt. I took a taxi back to the hotel. I needed to call Goldman. We had a lot of work to do before noon. Dante was a fool. He was weak. He was greedy. But he was my son. And no one, absolutely no one, was going to destroy my son but me. I would punish him. I would break him. But I would not let this vulture pick his bones clean. I dialed Goldman's number. Did you get it? He asked immediately. I got it, I said. And Goldman, yeah. Add another lawsuit to the pile. Conspiracy to commit fraud. And alienation of affection. I want to bury Sterling so deep he will need a mining permit to see the sun. Done, Goldman said. See you at the open house, Silas. I hung up. The game had changed. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about war, and I was bringing the heavy artillery. I sat in the back booth of a diner on 4th Street where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the air smelled of bacon grease and despair. It was the kind of place Dante and I used to come for breakfast on Saturday mornings before I taught him how to frame a wall or fix a carburetor. Back then, he loved the pancakes. Now as he walked through the door, he looked at the sticky linoleum floor with the same disgust he had shown my belongings on the front lawn. He was wearing a new watch. I recognized the brand. It cost more than the car I drove. He sat down across from me, not bothering to take off his sunglasses even though it was dim inside. He did not order coffee. He checked his phone 3 times in the first 30 seconds. "Make it quick, Dad," he said, his voice tight. "Courtney is waiting for me at the lawyer's office. We have a lot of paperwork to finalize for the sale." I looked at him. I looked for the boy who used to cry when he dropped his ice cream cone. I looked for the young man who swore he would make me proud. I saw neither. I saw a man who was drowning in debt and clinging to a woman who would use him as a life raft until she reached the shore and then kick him back into the water. I needed to try one last time. Not for me, but for him. I needed to know if there was anything left to save. If there was even a sliver of decency buried under the layers of greed and fear. "Dante," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I know about the money." He froze. His hand stopped halfway to his phone. "What money?" "I know you drained the joint account," I said. "I know about the gambling. I know you are broke, son. And I know Courtney is pushing this sale because you are both desperate." His face went pale, then red. He leaned across the table, his voice a hiss. "You do not know anything, old man. That money was an investment. It is tied up. And the sale is business. It is strategic. Stop lying," I said. "Just stop. I am not here to fight you. I am here to offer you a way out." I reached into my jacket pocket. Dante flinched as if I were pulling a gun. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a deed. Not to the house on Oak Street, but to a plot of land in Alabama. 40 acres of timber that had been in my family for 3 generations. It was the only thing my father left me. "I have this," I said, sliding the paper across the sticky table. "It is unencumbered. I have had offers on the timber rights. It is worth about $50,000, maybe 60 if we push." Dante looked at the paper, then at me. His expression was blank. "So what?" "I will sell it," I said. "I will liquidate it this week. I will give you the cash. Every cent. It is enough to clear your gambling debts with the sharks. It is enough to get you breathing room." Dante picked up the paper. He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. 50,000. "You want to give me $50,000? "Yes," I said. "But there is a condition." He dropped the paper back onto the table. "Of course there is. What is it? You want to move back in? You want your room back?" "No," I said. "I want you to leave her." Dante went still. "Excuse me." "Leave Courtney," I said. "She is poisoning you, Dante. She is stealing from you. She does not love you. She loves what she thinks you can give her. Leave her. Walk away from this fraudulent sale. Come back to the family. We can start over. You and me, we can rebuild. I have connections. I can get you a job, a real job. We can pay off the debts together, but you have to choose. Right now, it is her or me." I held my breath. This was it, the moment of truth. I was offering him redemption. I was offering him a lifeline. It wasn't millions of dollars, but it was honest. It was clean. Dante looked at me. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, hard stones. He picked up the deed to the Alabama land and crumpled it in his fist. "Are you insane?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think 50 grand is going to fix my life? You think I am going to leave a woman who just brokered a $3 million deal for a pile of dirt in Alabama and a job swinging a hammer with my daddy?" He threw the crumpled paper at my chest. It bounced off my tie and landed in my coffee cup, splashing brown liquid onto the table. "You are pathetic, Dad," he said, standing up. "You are small time. You have always been small time. Courtney is going to make us kings. We are closing on the house tomorrow. $2 million net profit after we pay off the liens. $2 million. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the expensive cologne masking the scent of fear sweat. "Keep your dirt money," he sneered. "You are going to need it. Coffins are expensive these days, and at the rate you are going to need one soon. Do not call me again. Do not come to the open house. Just die quietly, Dad. It is the only thing you can do to help me now." He turned and walked out of the diner. He did not look back. He got into his black sedan and sped away, leaving his father sitting in a booth with a coffee stain on his shirt and a crumpled legacy floating in a mug. I sat there for a long time. The waitress came by and asked if I wanted a refill. I shook my head. I reached into my pocket and felt the small, hard shape of the voice recorder. I clicked the stop button. The tape had run for 10 minutes. It had captured everything. The admission of the gambling, the rejection of the help, the cruelty. It was over. The son I raised was gone. He had died in this booth. What walked out the door was just an accomplice to a crime. I took the crumpled deed out of the coffee cup. I smoothed it out on the table and dried it with a napkin. It was stained, but the land was still there. The roots were still deep. I wasn't sad anymore. The grief had evaporated, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. I had given him a chance. I had given him a choice. Now I was going to give him consequences. I put the recorder in my pocket. I put a $20 bill on the table. I stood up and walked out of the diner. The sun was shining, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the weight of the ledger in my bag and the plan in my head. "Goodbye, Dante," I whispered to the empty street. "You wanted the millions. You wanted the big leagues. Well, son, you are about to find out that in the big leagues, when you strike out, you lose everything." I hailed a taxi. "Take me to the barber," I said, "and then take me to the suit shop. I had an open house to crash, and I needed to look like the owner." The barber chair was leather and chrome, old school, just the way I liked it. The razor scraped against my neck, a sound like sandpaper on stone removing the gray stubble of the last 3 days. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the wet, shivering ghost who had been kicked out of his own home. This man looked sharp. This man looked dangerous. I didn't just need a haircut, I needed a costume. I needed to look like the kind of man who could buy and sell Dante and Courtney 10 times over without blinking. I paid the barber and walked out into the afternoon sun, adjusting the collar of my new shirt. It was time to make the call. I didn't use my old flip phone for this one. I used a burner phone Goldman had given me, untraceable and disposable. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago. "Marcus," I said when the line clicked open. "It is Silas." There was a pause on the other end, then a deep, booming laugh. "Silas Vance, as I live and breathe. To what do I owe the pleasure? You have not called since you saved my concrete pour on the stadium project in '99. I am calling in the marker." "Marcus," I said, my voice flat. The laughter stopped instantly. Marcus Thorne was a billionaire developer, a man who owned half the skyline, but he was also a man of honor. He knew what a marker meant. "Name it, Silas. Do you need money? Do you need a crew? I need a performance," I said. "I need you to play a role." I explained the situation. I told him about the house. I told him about the eviction. I told him about the ground lease. I didn't leave anything out. Silence stretched on the line, heavy and thick. "That is cold," Silas Marcus finally said, his voice low with respect. "That is biblical. They tried to put me in a pauper's grave while I was still breathing, Marcus," I said. "I am just returning the favor." "I am in," he said. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to call Prestige Realty," I said. "Ask for Courtney Vance. Tell her you represent an international buyer who wants privacy. Tell her you want the house on Oak Street. Consider it done." "What is the offer?" $5 million cash," I said. I heard Marcus whistle. "The house is worth 2.5 at best." "Exactly," I said. "Greed makes people blind, Marcus. If you offer them market value, they will negotiate. They will think. But if you offer them double, they will panic. They will be so afraid of losing the deal they won't ask questions. They won't check the land records. They will just see the dollar signs and run off the cliff." "And the catch?" Marcus asked. "The catch is the timeline," I said. "Tell her the buyer is flying out on Sunday night. Tell her the contract has to be signed tomorrow at the open house. In person. No electronic signatures. Tell her your client wants to make a spectacle. He wants to see the property while the other potential buyers are there so he can crush them. Tell her to make it a big event. Champagne, catering, the works. I want an audience, Marcus. I want everyone in this town to see them fall." "I understand," Marcus said. "I will make the call in 10 minutes. Get your popcorn ready, Silas." I hung up and threw the burner phone into a trash can. I walked back to the hotel, my heart beating a steady rhythm of anticipation. I went up to my room and opened my laptop. I put on my headphones and activated the listening app connected to the bug in Courtney's orchid. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then I heard it. The phone in Courtney's office rang. Prestige Realty. Courtney, speaking her professional voice, was smooth like polished glass. There was a pause as she listened. Then I heard a gasp, a sharp intake of air. 5. 5 million. She stammered, her voice cracking. Cash. She listened again. I could practically hear the gears in her head spinning, grinding against each other. Yes, of course, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. We can absolutely accommodate that. An exclusive signing at the open house. Yes. No, we won't accept any other offers until then. I understand. Your client wants to make a statement. We can do that. We can definitely do that. She hung up the phone. For a second there was silence. Then a scream. A scream of pure, unadulterated triumph. Sterling, get in here, she yelled. I heard the door open. Sterling's heavy footsteps approached the desk. What is it? Did we lose the financing? We don't need financing, Courtney said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I just got a call from Marcus Thorne's office. He has a buyer, an anonymous whale, $5 million sterling, 5 million cash. Sterling let out a low whistle. That is double the asking price. Why? Who cares why? Courtney snapped. Maybe he likes the architecture. Maybe he is laundering money. I do not care. He wants to sign tomorrow at the open house. He wants a show. He wants to sign the contract right in front of everyone. Sterling laughed. It was a greedy, ugly sound. That means the commission alone is enough to get us to Bali and buy a villa instead of just renting one, Courtney finished. Oh my God, this is it. This is the exit strategy. What about Dante? Sterling asked. Does he need to be there? Unfortunately, yes, Courtney said, her voice dropping to a sneer. His name is on the deed. He has to sign. But do not worry. I will tell him the buyer insisted on confidentiality. I will tell him the price is 3 million. We will pocket the extra 2 million in the offshore account before he even knows what happened. He is so desperate he will sign anything I put in front of him. I sat back in my chair, closing my eyes. She was going to rob my son even while robbing me. She was going to skim $2 million off the top of a fraudulent sale. It was layers upon layers of deceit. Call the caterers, Courtney ordered. I want the best. I want shrimp. I want champagne. I want a jazz band. Call the local press too. Tell them we are closing a record-breaking deal for the district. I want my face in the business section on Monday morning. I want everyone to know that Courtney Vance is the queen of real estate. She was digging her own grave and she was ordering gold-plated shovels to do it. I took off the headphones. I didn't need to hear anymore. The trap was set. The bait was taken. I stood up and walked to the window. The city looked different now. It didn't look cold. It looked like a stage. Tomorrow at noon, my house would be full of people. There would be music. There would be wine. There would be reporters. Courtney wanted a show. She wanted to be the queen. Well, I was going to give her a coronation she would never forget. I looked at the suit hanging in the closet. It was dark navy wool, perfectly tailored. A power suit. The kind of suit a man wears when he owns the room. I checked my watch. I had 18 hours. 18 hours to review the documents with Goldman one last time. 18 hours to make sure the police were on standby. 18 hours until I walked back through the front door of 54 Oak Street, not as a father, not as a victim, but as the law. Dante thought he was selling a house. Courtney thought she was stealing a fortune. They were both about to find out that the only thing being sold tomorrow was them, and the price was going to be everything they had. The street didn't look like Oak Street anymore. It looked like a parking lot for a luxury car dealership. Bentleys, Porsches, a fleet of Mercedes sedans lining the curb where I used to teach my son to parallel park. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and the charcoal smoke from a catering truck parked in the driveway. My driveway. The driveway I had poured concrete for in '82, smoothing it out under the hot August sun until it was perfect. Now it was just a staging ground for the circus. I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce Goldman had arranged. It was tinted a dark fortress on wheels. From the back seat I watched the spectacle unfold. It wasn't a house sale, it was a coronation. Courtney had gone all out. There was a live jazz band set up on the porch, a trio playing soft, inoffensive music that floated over the lawn she had desecrated just days before. Waiters in white jackets circulated through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. The house itself had been transformed. It was no longer the sturdy brick home I built with my own sweat. It was a showroom. The front door was wide open, spilling the sound of polite, expensive laughter into the afternoon air. She had removed the warmth. She had removed the soul. It looked like a magazine spread, sterile and hollow. And there was Dante, my son. The boy I raised to be a king was standing by the entrance holding a silver tray of champagne flutes. He wasn't greeting guests as the owner. He was serving them like hired help. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, his shoulders slumped inside a suit that didn't quite fit, his eyes darting around nervously as if he were afraid he would drop a glass. He was the host, yet he looked like he was apologizing for his own existence. Courtney had reduced him to a prop, a servant in the house his father built. I watched as a group of potential buyers walked past him. They didn't even look him in the eye. They just took a glass from the tray and kept walking, treating him with the invisible disdain reserved for the staff. My heart ached for him, but the ache was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had chosen this. He had chosen to be her footstool rather than my son. Then I saw her. Courtney. She was in her element. She was wearing a red dress that looked like it had been cut from a fresh wound, sharp and attention-grabbing. She was holding court in the center of the living room, standing right where my favorite recliner used to be. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a glass of wine in one hand and a brochure in the other. She looked radiant. She looked victorious. I rolled the window down just an inch, enough to hear the conversation drifting from the open windows. The acoustics of the house were perfect. I knew they were. I designed them that way. "Oh yes, this property has been in the family for generations," I heard her say, her voice projecting that practiced sincerity of a career liar. "It is truly a gem. My late father-in-law, Silas. God rest his soul, he passed away last winter." I froze. My grip on the cane tightened until my knuckles turned white. Dead. She had killed me off. She wasn't just selling my house, she was selling my ghost. She had erased my existence to make the title transfer seem cleaner, to add a layer of tragic romance to her sales pitch. It was his dying wish. She continued, dabbing at a dry eye with a cocktail napkin. He grabbed my hand right before the end and said, "Courtney, you take this house. You take it and you build a future." He knew Dante and I would honor his legacy. That is why he left it all to me. Not even to Dante, mind you. To me. He trusted my vision. The crowd murmured in sympathetic approval. They ate it up. The tragic death, the devoted daughter-in-law, the legacy passed down. It was a beautiful story. It was a perfect lie. I looked at Dante. He was standing just a few feet away, refilling a glass for a man in a gray suit. He heard her. He heard his wife tell a room full of strangers that his father was dead. And he said nothing. He didn't flinch. He didn't correct her. He just poured the champagne and faded into the wallpaper. That silence was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. If he had spoken up, if he had shown even a flicker of spine, maybe I would have felt mercy. But he let her bury me while I was still breathing. The man in the gray suit the proxy Marcus had sent stepped forward. He looked the part. Tall, imposing, with a European accent that sounded like old money. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice carrying over the jazz music. "The story is touching. Truly. And the property is magnificent. My client is ready to proceed. We are prepared to sign the contracts immediately. The $5 million is in escrow, ready to be released upon signature." Courtney's eyes lit up. It was the look of a predator who just felt the trap snap shut. $5 million. It was freedom. It was Bali. It was the end of her debts and the beginning of her new life. "Wonderful," she beamed. "We have the notary right here in the library. We can do it now. I want everyone to witness this. It is a historic sale for the district." She clapped her hands, silencing the band. "Everyone, please," she announced, her voice ringing out like a bell. "If you could gather in the living room, we are about to make history. Today we are not just selling a house, we are fulfilling a legacy." The guests shuffled forward, forming a semicircle around her. She stood there glowing, the queen of the castle, about to sign away my life on a silver platter. She looked at Dante and snapped her fingers, pointing to the table where the documents were laid out. He scurried over, putting down the tray, and handed her a gold pen. She took the pen. She looked at the papers. She looked at the crowd. "This is for you, Silas," she said, looking up at the ceiling as if I were watching from heaven. I opened the door of the Rolls-Royce. "You are right, Courtney," I whispered to myself as I stepped out onto the pavement. "It is for me." I adjusted my cufflinks. I buttoned my bespoke Italian jacket. I took my cane, the one with the heavy silver head. I didn't walk with the shuffle of an old man. I walked with the stride of a man who owned the concrete beneath his feet. Goldman stepped out from the other side of the car, clutching a briefcase that contained the apocalypse. The two police officers we had coordinated with fell in step behind us. We walked up the driveway. The catering staff stopped and stared. The guests on the porch fell silent, parting like the Red Sea as I approached. They didn't know who I was, but they knew power when they saw it. I reached the front door. I could see Courtney inside, bending over the table, the pen poised over the paper. She was seconds away from signing. I stepped across the threshold. The sound of my cane striking the hardwood floor echoed like a gunshot. Crack. Courtney looked up. Dante looked up. The whole room turned. The silence that fell over the house was absolute. It was heavier than concrete. Courtney's face went from triumph to confusion, and then as recognition set in to absolute, unadulterated horror. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. Her hand shook and the pen dropped from her fingers, rolling across the document she was about to sign. Dante dropped the bottle of champagne he was holding. It shattered on the floor, exploding in a spray of foam and glass, but no one moved. No one even flinched. "Hello, Courtney," I said, my voice calm, filling the room without shouting. I walked forward, the crowd stepping back instinctively to give me a path. I walked right up to the table where my life was being sold. I looked at the papers, I looked at the fake deed, and then I looked at her. "I apologize for being late," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "But I heard there was a funeral today. My funeral. And I thought it would be rude not to attend." Courtney's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish on a dock. She looked at Dante for help, but Dante was staring at me as if he were seeing a ghost. He was trembling. Who is this?" the proxy buyer asked, playing his part perfectly. "Mrs. Vance, you said the owner was deceased." "He is," Courtney stammered, her voice a high-pitched squeak. This is security," she screamed suddenly, her voice cracking with panic. "Get him out of here. This is a crazy old man. He is trespassing." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He has dementia. He doesn't know where he is. Someone call the police." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there leaning on my cane, watching her unravel. "I don't think that will be necessary, Courtney," I said. I motioned to the door. The two police officers stepped into the room. Courtney let out a sigh of relief. "Thank God," she said, rushing toward them. "Officer, arrest him. He is violating a restraining order. He is dangerous." The officers didn't move toward me. They moved toward the table. And behind them, Goldman stepped forward. He opened his briefcase with a loud click. "Mrs. Vance Goldman," said, his voice like gravel. "The restraining order has been vacated as of this morning. It seems the judge took issue with the perjury in your application." "Perjury," Courtney whispered. "And as for trespassing," I said, stepping closer to her until I could smell the fear coming off her in waves. "You cannot trespass in your own house." I turned to the crowd. I looked at the neighbors who had watched my things get thrown on the lawn. I looked at the investors. I looked at the elite of the city she was trying to impress. "My name is Silas Vance," I announced. "I built this house. I laid this floor. And contrary to what my daughter-in-law just told you, I am very much alive." I looked at Courtney. "And I am here to collect the rent." The engine of the Rolls-Royce purred like a sleeping lion as it turned the corner onto Oak Street. From the back seat behind the tinted glass that separated me from the world, I watched the spectacle. My driveway was lined with luxury sedans, a parade of German engineering that belonged to the bankers and investors Courtney was so desperate to impress. The house itself looked magnificent. I had to give her that. She had polished it until it shined, stripping away the warmth of a home to reveal the cold value of an asset. But she forgot that a house without a foundation is just a pile of bricks waiting to fall. I adjusted the cuffs of my suit. It was a midnight blue, bespoke Italian cut tailored to within a millimeter of perfection by a man who usually dressed senators. It cost $5,000 and it felt like armor. I reached for my cane. It wasn't the medical walking stick I sometimes used for my arthritis. This was a piece of art, solid ebony with a heavy, sterling silver head shaped like a lion. It wasn't a support. It was a scepter. Goldman, sitting in the front seat, turned to look at me. His ancient eyes twinkled with the thrill of the hunt. "Are you ready, Silas?" he asked. I looked at the house where I had raised my son. I looked at the banner that said "Sold" hanging prematurely from the porch. I looked at the security guard standing by the door, a young man in a cheap blazer, looking bored. "I have never been more ready," I said. The car glided to a stop right in front of the walkway, blocking the path of a waiter trying to carry a tray of empty glasses. The driver, a large man on Goldman's payroll, stepped out and opened my door. I stepped out onto the pavement. My Italian leather shoes made a sharp, authoritative click against the concrete I had poured myself 30 years ago. I stood to my full height. I didn't hunch. I didn't shuffle. I let the years fall off me, replaced by the weight of my anger and the strength of my resolve. The chatter on the lawn died down instantly. People turned to look. A Rolls-Royce does that. It commands attention. But then they looked at the man standing next to it. They saw the suit. They saw the silver cane. And for a moment, nobody recognized the wet, shivering old man who had been kicked to the curb just days before. I began to walk up the driveway. Click, step, click, step. The sound of the cane was a metronome counting down to their destruction. The security guard straightened up, confused. He put a hand out, unsure whether to stop me or salute me. I didn't even look at him. I walked past him with such absolute certainty that he instinctively stepped aside. You don't stop a man who walks like he owns the pavement. I reached the porch steps. The jazz band was playing a soft tune, something light and airy that clashed violently with the storm I was bringing. Through the open front door I could see the living room. It was packed. Courtney was standing on a small raised platform near the fireplace, holding a microphone glowing with the triumph of a woman who thinks she has gotten away with murder. She was laughing at something a potential buyer had said, her head thrown back, her neck exposed. Beside her stood Dante holding a bottle of champagne, looking like a servant in his own house. He looked hollow. He looked haunted. I stepped through the doorway. The change in the room was instantaneous. It started with the people nearest the door. They went silent, stepping back to give me room, their eyes wide. The silence spread like a wave, rippling through the crowd until it reached the front of the room. The jazz band trailed off the saxophone player, lowering his instrument in confusion. Courtney froze mid-laugh. She lowered the microphone, her eyes scanning the room to see what had caused the interruption. Then her gaze landed on me. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the suit. She looked at the cane. And then she looked at my eyes. She didn't see the confused, helpless father-in-law she had evicted. She saw the executioner. For a second, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then panic took over. Courtney's hand shook so hard the champagne in her glass spilled onto her expensive dress. She gripped the microphone, her knuckles white. "Security!" she screeched, her voice cracking high and shrill. "Security, get in here! Get this man out!" The crowd murmured, confused. They looked from her to me. I didn't move. I stood in the center of the room, my hands resting on the silver head of my cane, watching her unravel. "He is trespassing," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is a senile old man. He is dangerous. Get him out of my house right now." Two security guards pushed through the crowd, looking uncertain. They saw a distinguished, wealthy-looking man in a $5,000 suit, not the vagrant she was describing. They hesitated. Dante dropped the champagne bottle. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, but didn't break. It rolled across the hardwood floor, stopping at my feet. He stared at me, his eyes wide with terror and recognition. He knew. He knew exactly who I was, and for the first time he realized he had bet against the wrong man. I stepped over the bottle. I walked forward. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked straight toward the platform where Courtney stood. "Stop him!" she screamed, backing away until she hit the fireplace mantel. "Why is nobody stopping him?" "He is crazy. He thinks he lives here." I reached the platform. The security guards were close now, reaching for my arms. I turned my head and looked at the lead guard. I didn't say a word. I just gave him a look that said, "If you touch me, you will lose your job, your license, and your pension before the sun goes down." The guard froze. He lowered his hand. I turned back to Courtney. She was trembling, her breathing shallow and fast. She looked like a trapped animal. I reached out and took the microphone from her hand. She was too paralyzed to resist. She just let it go, her fingers going limp. I turned to face the room. I looked at the investors. I looked at the bankers. I looked at the neighbors who had watched my life get thrown into the mud. I tapped the microphone twice. The sound echoed through the silent house loud and clear. I adjusted my cuffs. I leaned on my cane. and I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf who has just cornered the sheep. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice calm, deep, and resonating with absolute authority. I apologize for the interruption. I know you were all enjoying the celebration. I paused, letting the tension build until it was almost unbearable. But I continued, looking directly at Courtney, whose knees were starting to buckle. I heard there was a funeral here today. My funeral. And I thought it would be terribly rude of me not to attend. You call me a trespasser, Courtney, but you seem to have forgotten the very first lesson of real estate: always check the title. I nodded to Goldman. He didn't say a word. He simply walked over to the audio-visual system Courtney had set up for her presentation. He plugged in his tablet. The large projection screen behind Courtney, which had been displaying flattering photos of the house and the garden, flickered. The images of the staged living room disappeared. In their place, a high-resolution digital scan of a yellowed legal document appeared. The room went deadly silent. Every eye was fixed on the screen. It was an old document typed on a typewriter, not a computer, with a stamp from the city registry dated 1980. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Ground Lease Agreement." I tapped the cane on the floor again, drawing their attention back to me. "You are all standing on Lot 54B, I began, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. "And you are right about one thing, Dante. You do own this house. You own the wood, you own the glass, you own the roof and the drywall. I gave you that deed 10 years ago, just like you said." I saw a flicker of confusion in Dante's eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. But I continued, my voice dropping an octave. "Owning a house is not the same thing as owning the land it sits on. Look at the screen." Goldman zoomed in on the document. "In 1980, when this district was nothing but swamp and potential, the city issued 99-year ground leases to encourage development without losing municipal assets. I bought the lease for this lot, but I didn't buy it as an individual. I bought it through the Vance Family Trust." I pointed at the screen with my cane. "When I transferred the house to you, Dante, I transferred the structure, the improvements. But I never transferred the land lease. That remained with the trust." "And do you know who the sole trustee is?" I tapped my chest. "Me." Courtney laughed nervously, looking around at the guests. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "That is just a technicality. A lease from the 80s. It doesn't mean anything. We have the deed to the house. It means everything." I roared, my patience finally snapping. I walked toward her, closing the distance. "You are a real estate agent, Courtney. You should know this. It is called a land lease. You own the building, but you pay rent for the dirt. And do you know what the terms of this specific lease are?" Goldman swiped on the tablet. The screen changed to a highlighted paragraph. Clause 14. I recited it from memory because I was the one who wrote it. Clause 14 states that if the lessee attempts to sell, transfer, or encumber the structural asset without the express written consent of the landowner, the lease is immediately voided. Furthermore, if the lease expires without renewal, the landowner reserves the right to reclaim the land and all improvements thereon. I looked at Dante. He was pale, sweating profusely. "Dante, look at the date," I said softly. "Look at the expiration date of the original lease." He squinted at the screen. His lips moved as he read. "Yesterday. The lease expired yesterday," I said. "And instead of coming to me to renew it, instead of asking your father for help, you tried to sell the house out from under me. You triggered Clause 14. I turned to the crowd, to the investors who were clutching their checkbooks, to the neighbors who were watching with their mouths open. "This house is no longer for sale," I announced, "because the seller does not have the right to sell it. He is in default." Courtney was shaking her head violently. No, that is not true. We have title insurance. We have—" "You have nothing," I interrupted. "You have a pile of bricks sitting on my land, and I am not renewing the lease." I leaned in close to her, so close I could see the cracks in her heavy makeup. "I am exercising my right of reclamation, Courtney. But because I am a generous man, I am going to give you a choice. A choice you did not give me when you threw my clothes in the mud." I raised my voice so everyone could hear the verdict. "You have 24 hours. 24 hours for what?" she whispered, her voice trembling with terror. "To remove your property from my land," I said. The room gasped. "You own the house, right?" I said, gesturing to the walls. "Then take it. Put it on a truck. Move it brick by brick. I do not care how you do it. But you have 24 hours to get this structure off of Lot 54B. And if we don't, she asked, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. If this house is still on my land at noon tomorrow, I continued, my voice cold as steel, then, under the terms of the contract, the structure forfeits to the landowner. I will take the house. I will take the furniture. I will take the fixtures. I will take everything. I looked at the proxy buyer the man Marcus had sent. I believe the sale is canceled, sir, I said, unless you are interested in buying a house that is about to be repossessed. The man smiled a thin, professional smile. I believe you are right, Mr. Vance. My client is not interested in properties with legal entanglements. He closed his briefcase and walked out. The silence that followed was absolute. Dante sank to his knees. He didn't faint. He just crumbled under the weight of his own stupidity. He looked at the floor he thought he owned, and realized he was standing on quicksand. Courtney looked at me with pure hatred, but there was fear there too. Deep, primal fear. She had lost the sale. She had lost the commission. And she was about to lose the roof over her head. Get out, I said. What? She whispered. Get out of my house, I said. The open house is over. The party is over. You have 24 hours to move your asset. Tick-tock, Courtney. I turned my back on them. I looked at Goldman, who was packing up his tablet with a satisfied smirk. I walked to the door, my cane tapping a victory march on the hardwood. The guests parted for me, rushing to get out of the way, rushing to leave the scene of the disaster. I stopped at the threshold and looked back one last time. Dante was on the floor crying. Courtney was screaming at him, blaming him, hitting his shoulder. They were tearing each other apart, just like I knew they would. I walked out into the sunshine. The air tasted sweet. I had my house back, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. That was just the foundation. Now it was time to bring down the walls. The room was still buzzing from the revelation of the ground lease when Goldman plugged a small USB drive into the audio system. I looked at Courtney, who was now pale and shaking, leaning against the mantel for support. She had lost the sale. She had lost the commission. But she still had one card left to play her victimhood. She was about to lose that, too. You think this is over? Courtney hissed, her voice thin and desperate. This is a misunderstanding, a technicality. I still have rights. I am Dante's wife. I am entitled to half of everything. Half of nothing is still nothing. Courtney, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. But you are right about one thing. You are Dante's wife. For now. I nodded to Goldman. He pressed play. The sound quality was crystal clear, amplified by the expensive speakers Courtney had rented for the occasion. It was the recording from her office, the one I had captured while hiding in her bathroom. So did he sign the papers? A deep, familiar voice boomed through the room. Not yet, but he will. Courtney's voice answered, sharp and cruel. He is desperate. He thinks this sale is going to save his life. Dante's head snapped up. He looked at Courtney, confusion warring with disbelief on his face. He is a useful idiot, isn't he? The male voice laughed. Your husband, I mean. He is a means to an end, Courtney's recorded voice said, and the venom in her tone was palpable. Once the house sells, once the wire hits the account, I am filing for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. A gasp went through the crowd. Dante stood up, his hands trembling. Courtney, he whispered. And the money, the male voice asked. The money goes into the offshore account we set up, Skyline Ventures. Dante thinks it is a joint holding for our development project. He doesn't know I am the sole signatory. Once the funds clear, I am transferring everything to the Cayman account. And then, you and I are going to Bali, first class, one way. And Dante can rot in that miserable apartment with his guilt and his deadbeat father's debts. The recording ended with the sound of a passionate kiss. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the concrete foundation I had poured. Dante stared at his wife, his face a mask of pure devastation. The woman he had betrayed his father for, the woman he had stolen for, had been planning to leave him destitute all along. You were going to leave me, Dante choked out. We were partners. You said we were building an empire. I was building an exit strategy, you fool. Courtney screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. Did you really think I wanted to stay with a loser like you, a gambler, a coward who can't even stand up to his own father? She turned to the man standing near the window, the man whose voice was on the recording. Sterling, the flashy lawyer. He was trying to inch toward the door, his face pale. But he didn't make it. A woman stepped out from the crowd. She was elegant, dressed in a simple gray suit, and she had been standing quietly in the corner the entire time. I had invited her. She was Sterling's wife. She walked up to Sterling and without a word slapped him across the face. The sound was sharp, brutal. Then she turned to Courtney and slapped her too harder. "My husband might be a cheater," she said, her voice icy calm. "But at least he isn't stupid enough to get caught on tape." She turned to me and nodded once. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Vance. My lawyers will be in touch with his." Courtney held her cheek, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. Her world wasn't just crumbling, it was being atomized, but I wasn't done. "That was the second revelation," I said, stepping closer to the center of the room. "Now for the third." I looked at Dante. He was broken, weeping openly now, but tears wouldn't fix what he had done. "You stole $500,000 from our joint account, Dante," I said. "You gambled it away. But that wasn't enough, was it? You needed more to cover your losses, to pay the sharks." Dante looked up, terror in his eyes. "Dad, please." "You embezzled from your employer," I said. "Vance Construction, the company you work for as a project manager." How do you know that?" Dante whispered. "Because I founded Vance Construction 30 years ago," I said. "I retired from the day-to-day operations, but I never sold my controlling interest. I am the majority shareholder. I am your boss, Dante." The color drained from his face completely. He had been stealing from the company his father built, thinking he was just skimming from a faceless corporation. "I audited the books this morning," I continued. $200,000 in missing materials, fake invoices, ghost employees. You were clumsy, son. Desperate and clumsy. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder and closer. "I called the Economic Crimes Unit an hour ago," I said. "They have the audit report. They have the bank records." The front door burst open. 4 officers in tactical vests entered the room, followed by 2 detectives in suits. "Dante Vance?" one of the detectives asked. Dante nodded weakly. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny," the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. At the same time, another officer approached Courtney. "Courtney Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and money laundering." "Forgery!" Courtney screeched as they cuffed her. "I never forged anything." "We have the documents you submitted for the title transfer," the detective said. "Mr. Vance's signature was forged, and we have a statement from the notary you bribed." Chaos erupted. The guests were scrambling to leave, taking photos, whispering. My son and his wife were being led away in handcuffs, screaming at each other, blaming each other, their empire of lies collapsing into dust. Dante looked back at me as they dragged him out. Dad, help me, please." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had loved, and I felt nothing, just a cold, quiet peace. "I helped you for 40 years, Dante," I said. "I helped you walk. I helped you learn. I helped you live. Today I am helping you learn the most important lesson of all." "What lesson?" he sobbed. "That when you burn a bridge," I said, "you better make sure you know how to swim." They dragged him out the door. The police began to string yellow tape across the entrance. "Crime scene," it read. The house was sealed. The assets were frozen. I stood on the porch watching the police cars drive away. The flashing lights reflected in the windows of the Rolls-Royce. Goldman stepped up beside me. "That was thorough, Silas." "It was necessary," I said. "They wanted the house. Now they have a cell. It seems like a fair trade." I looked at the lawn. The sprinklers had stopped, but the grass was still wet. My clothes were still there, a soggy pile of memories. "Let's go, Goldman," I said. "I have a new life to start." We walked down the driveway, leaving the wreckage of the past behind. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. I was 75 years old. I had no house. I had no family. But for the first time in a long time, I was free. 1 year is a long time in the construction business. In 12 months, you can pour a foundation frame, a skyscraper, and hang the glass. You can change a skyline. But in the penal system, 1 year is an eternity, especially for a man who has never known a hardship that his father did not pay to fix. It has been 365 days since the gavel came down. I sit in my new study, the one overlooking the river, and I hold a piece of paper in my hand. It is cheap paper, the kind they sell in the prison commissary. The handwriting is shaky, cramped, and desperate. It is a letter from inmate number 74902. My son Dante. I do not visit him. I do not put money on his books. But my lawyer Goldman keeps tabs on him because information is the only currency that never devalues. I know what his life is like inside. It is not the white-collar resort he expected. Because of the embezzlement charges, because he stole from a construction firm, the other inmates know he is soft. They know he is a thief who stole from working men. Goldman told me that Dante lost a tooth last week. Someone took his food tray, and when Dante tried to argue the way he used to argue with waiters about wine lists, he learned that in prison customer service does not exist. He is thinning out. The expensive suits are gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hangs off his frame. He spends his days looking at the floor, trying to be invisible, trying to survive in a concrete box that I did not build. I look at the letter in my hand. It arrived yesterday. Dear Dad, it starts. The ink is smudged. Maybe it is a tear, maybe it is just sweat. I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was weak. Courtney made me do it. Please, Dad. I cannot survive in here. I need help. I need money for protection. I promise I will pay you back. Just get me a new lawyer. Get me an appeal. I love you. I read it twice. I look for a shred of manhood in the words. I look for a sentence that says I take responsibility. I look for an offer of restitution. But it is not there. It is just more begging. It is just more blame. Courtney made me do it. He is 41 years old and he is still blaming the woman he chose over his own father. He wants money for protection. He wants me to buy his safety again, just like I bought his car, just like I bought his education, just like I bought his house. I stand up and walk to the fireplace. It is a gas fireplace, modern and clean, but the fire is real enough. I do not feel sad. I do not feel angry. I feel finished. I strike a match. I hold the flame to the corner of the cheap prison paper. The fire catches quickly, eating the words. I watch as Dear Dad turns to black ash. I watch as I need money curls and disappears. I watch until the fire reaches my fingertips and I drop the burning scrap into the grate. I do not write back. I do not send money. And silence is the only answer he deserves. He wanted independence. Now he has it. He is independent of my money, independent of my protection, and independent of my love. While Dante rots in a cell, the woman who put him there is living her own version of hell. And I admit I check on her too. Not out of care, but out of a need to confirm that gravity still works. Courtney lost her real estate license permanently. The board does not look kindly on forgery and fraud. She lost the luxury car. She lost the designer clothes. She lost the friends who used to drink her champagne. When the money ran dry, so did their loyalty. She lives in a basement apartment now, 3 towns over. It is damp. It has mold. It is the kind of place she used to sneer at. And she works. Oh, she works. Goldman sent me a photo taken by a private investigator just last week. It is of the back alley of a greasy spoon diner called The Trough. The door is propped open and you can see into the dish pit. There she is. Courtney. Her hair is frizzy, tied back with a rubber band. Her manicure is a distant memory, her hands red and raw from hot water and industrial soap. She is wearing a stained apron, scrubbing a pot that is caked with burnt grease. She looks 10 years older. Her face is gaunt, hollowed out by stress and the bitter taste of her own failure. I can imagine the scene inside that kitchen right now. It is lunch rush. The air is thick with the smell of frying oil and onions. The manager, a man who probably yells to be heard over the exhaust fan, is barking orders. "Hurry up with those plates, Courtney," he shouts. "Table 4 is waiting." She scrubs faster, her knuckles scraping against the metal. She hates him. She hates the grease. She hates the life she built for herself. And then she looks up. Mounted in the corner of the kitchen above the pass-through window is a small television. It is tuned to the local news channel. The volume is low, but the picture is clear. Breaking news, the banner reads. On the screen there is a crowd of people. There are balloons. There is a large red ribbon stretched across the entrance of a brand new building. It is a beautiful building, modern brick with large windows and a community garden on the roof. It stands on the corner of Oak Street, on the very land where my house once stood. And there in the center of the screen, holding the giant scissors, is me. I am wearing a suit that fits perfectly. I am smiling, not the cold smile of the wolf, but the warm smile of a man who has built something that matters. Next to me is the mayor. Courtney freezes. The pot slips from her soapy hands and clatters into the sink, splashing dirty water onto her apron. She stares at the screen. She sees the sign above the entrance of the building. the Ruby Vance Community Center and Affordable Housing Complex. The reporter's voice cuts through the noise of the kitchen. Local philanthropist and retired engineer Silas Vance today opened the doors to a revolutionary housing project built on his own private land. The complex will provide high-quality, low-cost housing for 50 families along with a community center dedicated to the memory of his late wife, Ruby. Mr. Vance funded the entire project himself, stating that he wanted to turn a place of personal pain into a foundation for community growth. Courtney watches as on the screen I shake the mayor's hand. She watches as the camera pans over the building that sits on the land she tried to steal. She realizes that the millions she thought she was going to get, the millions she destroyed her life for, have been poured back into the concrete of this building. She sees me look into the camera, and for a second she feels like I am looking right at her, right through the television screen, into the dirty dish pit where she belongs. "Hey," the manager yells, slamming his hand on the counter. "Stop dreaming and wash the dishes. We do not pay you to watch TV." Courtney flinches. She looks down at the sink full of dirty water and floating food scraps. Tears mix with the sweat on her face. She picks up the sponge. She starts scrubbing again. She wanted to be a queen. Now she is serving the subjects she despised. I turn away from the fireplace in my study. The letter is ash. The past is burned. I walk to the window and look out at the city. I can see the roof of the Ruby Vance Center from here. It glows in the sunset. I lost a son. I lost a daughter-in-law. But I gained a legacy that will outlast all of us. I pick up my cane. The silver lion's head feels cool under my hand. I have a dinner reservation with Goldman. We are going to celebrate. Not the destruction of my enemies, but the construction of the future. The trash has been taken out. The house is clean. And Silas Vance is just getting started. The elevator doors slide open with a soft pneumatic hiss, revealing the 45th floor. I step out onto the marble floor of the penthouse, not with the heavy tread of a man burdened by the past, but with the light step of a man who has finally put down a heavy load. The city of Atlanta sprawls out beneath me, a grid of amber lights and moving steel, a living, breathing machine that I helped build from this height. The cars look like toys, and the people are invisible. It is quiet up here. Some people tell me it must be lonely. Goldman asks me sometimes when we share a drink on the balcony. If the silence bothers me, he looks at the empty leather chairs in the living room, and he sees a void. He sees an old man with no wife, no son, and no grandchildren to spoil. I look at those same empty chairs, and I do not see loneliness. I see peace. I see a space where no one is lying to me. I see a room where no one is calculating how long I have left to live so they can cash a check. I see a sanctuary. I walk to the wet bar and pour myself a glass of sparkling water. I do not drink the hard stuff as much anymore. I want to keep my head clear. I want to be awake for every second of this new life. I walk over to the corner of the living room where the floor-to-ceiling windows offer a view of the river. But I am not looking at the view. I am looking at the drafting table set up in the best light. It is my old table, the one I rescued from the warehouse. The wood is scarred from decades of compass points and razor blades. Sitting at that table is a young man. He is 20 years old. His name is Jamal. He is thin, with the kind of lean hunger in his face that I used to see in the mirror 50 years ago. He is wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, but his hands are clean and his focus is absolute. He does not hear me approach. He is lost in the geometry of a suspension bridge. I found Jamal 6 months ago. I was visiting the community center, the one I built on the land where my house used to stand. He was sitting in the back of a classroom, sketching on the back of a flyer. I looked over his shoulder. He wasn't drawing cartoons. He was drawing a structural cross-section of a retaining wall, and he had the load distribution perfectly correct. He is an orphan. He grew up in the foster system, bouncing from house to house, never having a room of his own, never having anything that couldn't be packed in a trash bag. In 5 minutes, he reminds me of the concrete I used to pour, rough, unpolished, but capable of bearing incredible weight if you just give it the right form. I clear my throat. Jamal jumps slightly and turns around. His eyes are wide, respectful. "Mr. Vance," he says, scrambling to stand up. "I didn't hear you come in. I was just trying to figure out the shear force on this support beam." "Sit down, son," I say, waving my hand. "Let me see." I lean over his shoulder. I smell the graphite of the pencil and the eraser dust. It is the smell of creation. I look at his lines. They are straight true, but there is a mistake in the calculation of the wind resistance. You are assuming a static load. I say, pointing to the arch, but wind isn't static. Jamal, it breathes, it pushes and pulls. If you build it this rigid, The first hurricane will snap it like a twig. You need to give it room to move. You need to let it dance a little. Jamal frowns, looking at the paper. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't tell me I am old and outdated. He doesn't roll his eyes. He picks up his eraser. "Show me," he says. I pick up a pencil. My hand shakes a little less than it used to. I draw a new line, correcting the angle. "See here," I say, "if you distribute the tension like this, the structure becomes stronger because it is flexible. It survives because it knows how to bend." Jamal watches my hand like I am performing magic. He nods, absorbing the lesson. "Like you," he says, softly. I pause. I look at him. "What do you mean?" I ask. "You," he says, looking me in the eye, "you bent, you didn't break when your family came for you. You let the wind blow through, and you are still standing." I put the pencil down. I look at this boy who has no blood relation to me. We share nothing but the color of our skin and a love for how things are put together. And yet, in this quiet moment, over a sheet of vellum paper, I feel a connection stronger than anything I ever felt with Dante. Dante had my DNA, he had my last name, he had my smile, but he didn't have my heart. He didn't have my spine. He thought inheritance was a right. He thought legacy was something you waited for, something you grabbed when the old man wasn't looking. Jamal thinks legacy is something you build. He thinks it is something you learn. You are right, Jamal. I say you have to bend, but you also have to know when to lock your joints and hold your ground. I walk over to the safe in the wall behind a painting. It is a digital safe now, not the old dial one I punch in the code. I pull out a document. It is thick bound in blue paper. I walk back to the table and place it on top of his drawing. "What is this?" Jamal asks, looking at the cover. "It is an adoption of sorts. I say not of a child, but of an heir. This is the incorporation paperwork for the new Architectural Scholarship Fund, and the deed to the firm. I want you to run it one day after you finish your degree, which I am paying for." Jamal looks at me, tears welling in his eyes. "Why," he whispers, "why me? I am nobody." "You are a builder, Jamal," I say, placing my hand on his shoulder, "and builders are never nobodies. We are the ones who hold the world up." He stands up and hugs me. It is an awkward hug, tight and desperate, the hug of a boy who has never had a father. I pat his back, feeling the thin shoulder blades. I realize something important up here in my tower, looking down at the city. I realize that blood is just biology, but character is destiny. My son chose his path, and it led him to a cage. Jamal chose his path, and it led him to a drafting table. I have peace now. Real peace. Not the quiet of the grave, but the quiet of a job well done. "Get back to work," I say, clearing my throat, my voice thick with emotion. That wine shear calculation isn't going to solve itself. Jamal smiles, wiping his eyes, and picks up the pencil. I walk to the window and look out at the city lights. One last time. I am Silas Vance, and I am finally home. In a world obsessed with appearances, never forget that the roots of a tree are hidden underground, yet they hold the entire structure. My family saw me as a withered branch to be pruned. Not realizing I was the root that fed them, they confused my generosity with obligation and my silence with ignorance. Greed is a heavy blindfold. It makes you walk off a cliff while thinking you are climbing a mountain. I took back not just my house, but my dignity. Remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you stop tolerating. My name is Silas Vance, and I hope my story helps you find your own voice. If you like this story, let me know in the comments what you would have done in my place. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time, stay strong. If Silas's journey of reclaiming his dignity resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? Your support helps share these stories. Until next time.